Chapter 581. I was born in the fashion of not doing anything. When I was born, the berserkers had already declined. Su Ming took a step forward and stepped into the air. His face was filled with grief, and there was a lonely air about him as he mumbled under his breath. The heartless heavens caused chaos. The heartless earth caused our dark mountain to die. War rises. The moon shatters into pieces. The road of Nanchi home is filled with sorrow. If the heavens have eyes, why don't they see me sink into darkness forever? If God had a spirit, why would he divide us? If I don't betray the heavens, why won't the heavens let me see the darkness of the night? I will not disappoint God. How can God forget my flesh and blood? Day and night, I think of my homeland. Wandering on the road, it is difficult to see the bitterness of the heavens. I think of my loved ones, but where are the souls? Souls think of me, and my heart is broken on the road of death. It's hard to tell the real from the fake. Life and death, heaven and earth, where am I? Weeping blood and raising my head. Why should I pity my life against the vicissitudes of life? Su Ming lifted his head and roared. His voice was like thunder, causing the clouds in the sky to tumble backwards as they trembled, revealing a ray of sunlight that penetrated through the thin layer of clouds above. As the sun shone on him, Su Ming took a huge step forward and charged towards Siv Island. His entire body was filled with killing intent and murderous aura. The grief brought by those 6 numbers, the confusion contained within the truth of what happened in Dark Mountain, the aura of death that had turned into the blood on Fong Tsonglan's fingertips, and all these things made Su Ming laugh loudly as he moved forward. He laughed and laughed, but his laughter was filled with coldness. He laughed at the heavens, laughed at the earth, laughed at his own life, laughed at the will of Di Tian, weeping blood and raising one's head. How could one regret the vicissitudes of life? Who am I? It doesn't matter whether it's Su Ming or destiny. I don't know who I am, but I know that no matter how vast the world is, my life is in my hands. Does it matter who it is? Su Ming threw his head back and laughed loudly. He had come to understand now. After experiencing all sorts of things, growing up between life and death, coming to understand the secrets of Dark Mountain when he was in Southern Swamp Island, seeing how different Fong Songlan was, all of these things had allowed Su Ming to understand. That's not important. What's important is that I exist. What's important is that I will always exist. What's important is that I will use all my abilities to unravel all of this fog. What's important is that I will trample all of this under my feet. Me, not me. It's me. There was a hint of arrogance in Su Ming's laughter, along with a hidden sadness. When a person discovered time and time again that what they thought was the most precious to them might be fake, what would they do? He could either give up or rise to power. What is true and what is false? So what if it is true, and so what if it is false? Su Ming charged forward, and wherever he went, the world would rumble. Under his extreme speed, the giants in the sea did not dare to lift their heads. The birds in the sky did not dare to get close, and all manner of living in the area did not dare to lift their heads. Since you call me destiny, then from now on, I, Su Ming, am your destiny. Since you call me Su Ming, then from now on, I will still be Su Ming. Su Ming threw his head back and laughed long and hard towards the sky. As he laughed, the killing intent and murderous aura on his body became much thicker. As if it had surged into the sky, it swept up the layers of clouds and charged towards eastern wasteland scour, Siv Island. As Su Ming continued charging forward, he did not see the woman who had always remained on southern Swamp Island, which had already left into the distance. He did not see the fated kin's statue worshipping the fated kin's statue on the island. He did not see Hu Zi's enraged roars and his endless grievances on the 9th summit in the land of the berserkers either. He also could not see that in the depths of the ground, in the other direction of the relocation gate, in the frozen world, in the buried Great Yu Imperial City, in the tall altar before the frozen elder of Great Yu, under the spine of the ferocious beast, were the words the old man had left behind before he died. When you know who you are not you. When you no longer know who you are you. Besides those words, The elder of Great U in the past could also see the faint smile at the corners of his lips that was filled with pity, hope, and a hint of benevolence when he saw everything with his dark eyes that could not see the world. Su Ming did not manage to see that smile clearly. But if he could see it clearly, then his heart would definitely tremble, his mind would definitely roar, and tears would definitely fall from his eyes as he stood on the frozen altar before Great Yu's elder. Because that smile, that benevolent smile, was something Su Ming would never forget. He did not care about who he was. It did not matter whether he was a berserker, a shaman, Su Ming, or destiny. It did not matter where he came from. It did not matter whether he was alive or dead. It did not matter whether this was the land of the berserkers or the so-called Death region. Su Ming did not care about these things. What he cared about was what was right before his eyes. What he cared about was the Ninth Summit. What he cared about this time was helping the people of South Morning get rid of the Scour Civ Festival that was held once every 2 years. He would get rid of it permanently. He would tell the cultivators of Eastern Wastelands that there were still powerful warriors in South Morning after the calamity, and they were also not to be trespassed. With that killing intent, Su Ming's speed reached its peak. Several days later, when the sky brightened and darkened several times, the clouds roared, and the rain falling from the sky looked as if it had turned into a long river in the sky. Due to Su Ming's speed, a gigantic island appeared before him. The screen of light around the island shone and shone with a colorful light. There was also a vast power exuding from it. There were 7 small islands surrounding it, and they looked like stars surrounding the moon, like guards protecting the island. Waves of powerful aura spread out indistinctly from the island. If the screen of light was not around, then this aura would have completely spread out, but even so, it was enough to intimidate all the people who came to the island and intimidate the ferocious beasts in the Dead Sea. The island was in the shape of a crescent moon, and there were countless jade carvings on it. It was incredibly luxurious, and there were also a large number of cultivators from Eastern Wastelands coming and going. It was an incredibly lively scene. Even though the Mo Luo Grand Meeting had yet to begin, the preparations for it were already underway. Su Ming did not bother hiding his arrival. That was why almost the instant he closed in on the island, the long arc in the sky that had swept through caused all the people on Scour Civ Island to be shocked to the core when they saw it. I, Su Ming of South Morning, have come to Scour Civ Island to destroy it. Once I leave, this island will be bathed in rivers of blood, and you will serve as a warning to Eastern Wastelands. Su Ming spread his great divine sense outwards without holding anything back and pressed down on the island with a bang. His voice instantly stirred up a thunderous roar on the island. At the instant all the people heard it, the long river of rain that had been sweeping up behind Su Ming charged forward, and like the river in the sky, it crashed into Scour Civ Island's protective screen of light. This scene was the descent of the heavenly river. At this scene, the rain was like arrows. This scene caused the Dead Sea to roar. This scene was earth-shattering. Fellow Taoists, why should we cherish the vicissitudes of life? Why should we cherish the reversal of yin and yang? He hoped for the toppling of the monthly votes list, for a fight to rise. To be continued. If you like this work, then please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 582. Fellow Taoists, why should we cherish our monthly votes for the sky? Fellow Taoists, why should we cherish our battle against the blue dome of heaven? Fellow Taoists, why should we cherish our lives against the vicissitudes of life? Fellow Taoists, why should we cherish our votes? Charge, charge, charge. To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to cast your recommendation votes and monthly votes. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 583. Su Ming's voice reverberated in the air within Scour Civ Island, and as the island continued trembling, it turned into an endless amount of echoes. As the echoes spread out and crashed into the island, it was as if thunder had roared within the island, and as it rumbled, it fell into the ears of all the people on the island. That voice was as cold as snow, and it was filled with a monstrous killing intent. There was also a terrifying presence within that voice that wanted to destroy everything, causing the hearts of all those who heard it to tremble violently. When they lifted their heads, they saw the long river of rain that filled the sky, rushing towards the island's protective screen of light. Scoursive Island was one of the bigger islands among the many islands around Eastern Wastelands. This island originally did not exist. It was formed when Eastern Wastelands crashed into the land of South Morning. Later on, it was occupied by the cultivators from Eastern Wastelands who could not step into Eastern Wastelands due to various reasons, and it turned into their paradise. These cultivators came from all sorts of backgrounds. Some of them were people who could not stand the land of Eastern Wastelands because they had killed too many people. Some of them had betrayed their sects and tribes, and some of them were lone practitioners. There were people with bloody hands all over the place. They were brutal and bloodthirsty. It was as if these people's personalities were the same, and their cruelty towards the people of South Morning had become their greatest joy over the past few years. If they ran into male South Morning people, they would usually kill them, extract their souls, and refine them. However, if they ran into women, they would be in an even more tragic state. Over the years, the number of South Morning people who died in their hands was innumerable. Most of these South Morning people had survived the disaster with great difficulty, but they also ran into a disaster that was as great as the disaster itself. All of this was because South Morning was much smaller than Eastern Wastelands, which is why it had crumbled under the impact of the crash. Eastern Wastelands, on the other hand, was much bigger, which was why the disaster they suffered was much smaller. It could be said that as the islands at the edge of Eastern Wastelands were formed, this place turned into the gathering place for the people who could be said to have been exiled by the orthodox Eastern Wastelands. In fact, over the years, there were quite a number of people who came from the inland of Eastern Wastelands, causing the strength of the islands to increase day by day. That was especially true when Old Man Mo Luo appeared. With his powerful cultivation base, he dominated the area and occupied the largest island. He named it Mo Luo and became the most powerful faction among the cultivators outside of the Eastern Wasteland. All the Eastern Wasteland's cultivators who belonged to Old Mo Luo called themselves Barren Swamp and were known as Barren Humans. Not only were they brutal towards the land of South Morning and had invaded and killed many times, they were also hostile towards the orthodox forces of Eastern Wastelands. But due to their wariness, they did not dare provoke them. However, if they ran into a lone member of the orthodox forces of Eastern Wastelands, they would usually end up the same as those in South Morning. Su Ming's arrival, his shocking presence, and the river of rain falling on the protective screen of light with a bang caused all the people on Scoursive Island to be shocked, but they did not feel much fear. Instead, a wave of brutality rose within them. This was a force formed by an innumerable amount of villains. These people bullied the kind and feared the evil. They would bare their fangs against the weak and created the Scoursive Festival. It was a feast that did not lose to drinking the blood of the people of South Morning. This was the only way for them to search for the value of their existence. As for experts, because they had the advantage in numbers, they disdained to submit. They thought that their slaughter and cruelty could intimidate all experts. In truth, their actions over the past few years had indeed caused many people to choose to avoid them. However, they did not know that the person they ran into this time was Su Ming. There was no need to care about humanity when it came to dealing with this sort of tribe. There was only one word for it, and that was to kill. Kill them until their blood flowed in rivers. Kill them until none of them were left alive. Kill them until even if they died, they would still be afraid. Make this island a ring for Eastern Wastelands. Booming sounds reverberated in the air. The protective screen of light on the island let out a violent rumble as the rain crashed into it. The light on the screen continued flashing, but it did not shatter. Roars could be heard coming for the island. Many desolate men flew up from all directions of the island. They were ferocious and bloodthirsty as they charged forward in groups. At the same time, 7 shocking rays of light flew out from the 7 guard islands surrounding the island. Behind these rays of light, there were hundreds of people following behind them. In an instant, a deafening roar shook the heavens and the earth outside the Scour Sieve Island. Su Ming's arrival and his powerful presence might not have made the barren humans of Scour Sieve Island afraid, but it had still shocked them greatly. That was why when they attacked this time, they attacked as a group. In the past, when they ran into powerful warriors, most of them behaved like this, and there were plenty of times when those powerful warriors were forced away by their madness and fearlessness towards death. This time, they wanted to use the same method. However, this method was useless against Su Ming. Su Ming's expression was calm. He decided that he might as well ignore Scour Sieve Island's protective screen of light for the time being. He stood in midair and looked at the ferocious faces and figures charging towards him from all directions as they roared. He lifted his right hand slowly and clenched his fist before him. With it, a powerful burst of purple light immediately erupted from his palm. That purple light was piercing to the eyes in Su Ming's palm. As it swiftly spread out, it turned into a long purple spear that was several dozens of feet long. At first glance, that spear would be a terrifying sight to behold. At the instant Su Ming held it horizontally in front of him, a cold sneer appeared at the corners of his lips, and killing intent shone in his aloof eyes. The instant that killing intent appeared, purple light spread out from Su Ming's entire body. That purple light covered his entire body like flowing water, and in the midst of that dazzling light, Su Ming's right hand was covered in armor. That armor looked as if it possessed life and spread out rapidly. In the blink of an eye, it covered Su Ming's entire body, and once a purple armor that covered his face appeared on his head. His hair also looked as if it had turned purple and was swaying behind his head. With his purple armor and long spear in hand, Su Ming stood in the sky, and his presence became even more astonishing. Su Ming lifted his head swiftly and swung the long spear horizontally before him. A piercing hum reverberated in the air, and the tip of the spear was pointed towards one of the 7 guardian islands near Scour Sieve Island, in the direction of the many long arcs flying towards them. Those who offend South Morning will be killed, no matter how far away they are. At the instant Su Ming said these words, he took a step forward, and with an indescribable speed, he turned into a long purple arc that charged towards the person who was coming towards him. They were the guardians of the 6th island, and the person in the lead was a middle-aged man. He was dressed in a luxurious robe, and his face was dark and murderous, but his heart was trembling and filled with shock. The appearance of Su Ming's powerful presence and the sight of his entire body flashing with purple light and turning into purple armor caused fear to rise in the middle-aged man's heart, even though he was a berserker in the initial stage of the berserker soul realm. However, he believed that all-powerful warriors would choose to retreat in the face of the savage's crazed and reckless presence. With this thought in mind, the middle-aged man let out a roar. As he lifted his right hand, a divine ability manifested. Just as he was about to execute his full power, a purple shadow suddenly appeared in his pupils. That purple shadow looked as if it had forced its way into his eyes, causing him to be momentarily stunned. When he registered what was going on and was about to retreat, a sharp pain shot through the center of his brows. That purple long spear had pierced 10 feet through his head at some unknown point of time, and blood gushed into the air. Besides the long spear, he also saw the aloof figure dressed in purple armor, holding the long spear. This was the last thing he saw in his life. A loud bang reverberated in the air. The person whose head had been pierced through by Su Ming's spear at an extreme speed exploded, and as his flesh and blood scattered into the air, the people who had followed behind him charged towards Su Ming without stopping, as if they had gone mad. Su Ming looked at them coldly and took a step forward. Purple light surged into the sky, and shrill screams of pain instantly reverberated in the air. Wherever Su Ming went, the purple spear would sweep through the area, and like a purple dragon, he would rush into the crowd. After a moment, when Su Ming walked out of the crowd, all the people who had come from the 6th island exploded, and their blood spilled into the sea. There was also a trickle of blood that flowed down Su Ming's long spear, which was slanted to the side. He stood in midair and slowly turned his head around to look at the people who had flown out from the other 6 islands in the sky coldly. All those who humiliated South Morning will pay with their blood, Su Ming said calmly. His voice spread out, and as it reverberated in all directions, he turned into a long arc once again and charged towards another group of people. It was as if Su Ming could only attack once he put on that purple armor, not retreat. Murderous aura surged into the sky from his body, and there was also a ferocious shadow that manifested behind him, as if it was roaring with a monstrous, murderous aura. At that moment, all the Mara Civ savages who saw Su Ming were shocked to the core. Their hearts were filled with shock, and fear filled their bodies and minds. Because as Su Ming arrived, no matter what level of cultivation they possessed, no one in the sky beyond the islands had any hope of surviving before him. Because even if they had gone mad, Su Ming was even crazier. Because while they might be cruel and bloodthirsty, they discovered that Su Ming was even crueler than them. That one sentence of blood must be paid with their blood turned into a funeral bell for the Mara Civ savages, and it turned into echoes that shook the sky. Su Ming was slaughtering, and wherever he went, all the people who blocked his path and all the people he saw would have their bodies shattered with a bang once they left. Rain poured down from the sky, as if it had fused together with the rain in the sky, causing the world to rain blood. A berserker in the initial stage of the berserker soul realm was nothing. In just a short moment, the savages on Scour Civ Island saw that the sky outside had practically turned blood red. Most of the 7 people protecting the island had died in that blood rain, and the shock in their hearts was something that could not be described with words. If they were already in such a state, then it was even more so for the Mara Civ savages guarding the islands outside the screen of light. When there were only a few dozens of them left, the Mara Civ savages who believed themselves to be more brutal than anyone else and were not afraid of death completely broke down. The collapse of their willpower caused them to scatter in fear. He's a madman. He's a bloodthirsty, ferocious spirit. South Morning? How could there be such a murderous person in South Morning? This is... When Su Ming saw the remaining people fleeing in fear, he lifted his left hand and pointed towards the sky. With it, the clouds and fog in the sky started rotating and turned into a whirlwind that descended. It swept through the sea and stirred up waves that surged into the sky. As it swept through the area, the dozens of people who were fleeing were all swept up by the whirlwind, and as loud rumbling sounds echoed in the air, not a single one of them survived. First update, please give me monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 584. Almost at the instant the remaining people from the Guardian Islands died, Su Ming lifted the long spear in his right hand slowly. Right at the instant the savages on Scour Civ Island were filled with shock, they saw Su Ming swinging his right hand in the sky. With that one swing, the long spear left his hand and turned into a long purple arc that sliced through the air and tore open a gigantic crack in the sky as it charged toward Scour Civ Island's screen of light. As a shocking boom reverberated in the air and the entire Scour Civ Island trembled and reverberated in the air, the purple light pierced through the protective screen of light and crashed into the island's ground with a bang, turning into a purple wave of impact that swept outwards. The protective screen of light shattered inch by inch and turned into an endless amount of shards. It was as if an invisible hand had pushed against it, and the screen of light exploded, sweeping up all the shards and sending them tumbling backwards. Almost at the same time the island's screen of light crumbled, there was a hall among the numerous mountains on the training island. That hall looked incredibly simple and unadorned. There were rows of memorial tablets placed inside, and they looked as if they were being worshipped. They looked like small towers, and there were quite a number of runic symbols carved on the memorial tablets, which exuded a dark and bizarre presence. There was an old man in white sitting cross-legged under the rows of memorial tablets. There was a long blade placed before him, and that blade exuded an eerie, freezing aura. If anyone looked at it for an extended period of time, they would feel as if a fierce soul was screaming in their ears. Waves of barely discernible black smoke spread out from the long blade and surrounded the area. The old man had a head full of white hair, and there was a scar that ran from the end of his right brow to the left corner of his mouth. That scar was red, and at the same time it looked incredibly hideous. It also gave the old man an incredibly terrifying presence. His expression was calm as he sat cross-legged, as if he did not pay too much attention to the changes around him. There was a middle-aged man sitting beside him. That man was dressed in a long robe, and his expression was just as calm. In his hands were two skulls that had been polished until they looked incredibly smooth, and he was spinning them continuously. There were 3 people standing near the entrance of the hall. 2 of them were white-haired old men, and the other was a boy. They stood there with respectful expressions, but there was also a hint of fear in their expressions. Progenitor, he called himself Su Ming, and he came from South Morning. The 7 guards outside the island have already been killed by him, and the first layer of defense on the island has also been broken by him. The boy among the 3 said in a low voice, "You're just a remnant of the land of South Morning." The old man in white with the scar on his face opened his eyes at that moment. Once he swept his gaze past the 3 people, he looked towards the long black blade before him. "The 3 of you, take my skewer blade and activate the desolation of blood formation. That should be enough to kill this man. Bring me his head." Once the old man finished speaking, the black blade before him immediately let out a buzz. That buzz was filled with slaughter and brutality. Once it let out that buzz, the black blade flew out on its own and circled the hall once before charging toward the boy. The boy received it respectfully with both hands. Excitement appeared on his face, and he quickly spoke. "Progenitor, don't worry. With Skura Blade and the desolation of blood formation, even if this person is a berserker in the later stage of the berserker soul realm, he will still be killed in the formation." As the boy spoke, he immediately took his leave. The eyes of the 2 old men by his side also sparkled, and a murderous look appeared on their faces. They left respectfully and turned into 3 long arcs that flew out of the hall with the boy. You should know that the 3 of them are not this person's opponent, even if they have your skewer blade. Once the 3 people left, the middle-aged man who was twirling the skull in his hand spoke flatly. "So what?" The old man's face was calm, and he closed his eyes. "I didn't expect that there would be such a powerful berserker among the people of South Morning. No one can see through his level of cultivation. He's clearly just in the bone sacrifice realm. But if you take a closer look, you'll find that his power is so great that it's terrifying. By the looks of it, he only took an instant to kill the 7 guards. He might have already reached the peak of the later stage of the berserker soul realm, or perhaps even higher," the middle-aged man said slowly with a sigh. "I'm afraid that even you will have to be incredibly careful in the face of this sort of enemy. That's why you don't want to come out immediately, right?" The middle-aged man smiled faintly and looked at the old man. "Are you done?" The old man opened his eyes and looked at the middle-aged man coldly. "That's true. Even if all the people in Scour Civ Island die, as long as you're still around, then this island will continue attracting more people who no longer exist in Eastern Wastelands to come here. Your forces of power will also continue growing." The middle-aged man smiled. "Have the people below test him continuously. It's the blood and slaughter that will make this person tired. As they continue testing him, find his weaknesses, then show up and fight. Even if Scour Civ Island turns into a river of blood, even if not a single blade of grass grows," the middle-aged man lamented. "Besides, you can bring out the full power of your ancestral worship soul in this temple. It will allow you to bring forth the power of a berserker who has attained great completion in the berserker soul realm for a short period of time. That's why waiting for him here is much better than going out to face him. Besides, there's also Sir M.O. Quebec. Even if an accident happens, with Sir M.O. K around, everything will disappear." The middle-aged man shook his head. He felt that it was a slight pity towards the person called Su Ming who came from outside. "And you're here as well," The old man with the scar on his face said calmly. The middle-aged man fell silent and sighed in his heart. Almost the instant the middle-aged man fell silent, a violent boom reverberated in the air outside the temple. A wave of impact also spread out, causing the entire island to tremble. The sounds of battle surged into the sky outside the temple. Dressed in purple armor, Su Ming held the long spear in his hand and walked forward. His footsteps were not quick, but there was an endless amount of shattered corpses behind him. There was also a ray of green light circling in the sky. That green light was naturally the small sword, and it was also controlled by Su Ming's nascent divinity. All those who dare to charge through the sky would have to face the sword slaughter. Further away in the distance, as the sky rumbled, a gigantic shadow manifested. That shadow was the small snake of the candle dragon. As it roared, it began fighting madly. The eyes of the savages in the area were bloodshot as they charged forward without care for anything else and executed their divine abilities. Even the weakest among them was in the bone sacrifice realm. As they rushed forward, thick murderous aura and blood-red light surrounded their bodies, and their roars echoed in the sky. If anyone looked down from the sky, they would be able to see clearly that the entire Scour Civ Island was covered in layers of blood-red screens of light. That blood-red screen of light covered most of the island, surrounding Su Ming and all the people on Scour Civ Island. The blood-red light on the blood-red screen of light continued flashing, and every single time it did so, a ray of red light would descend with a bang and charge towards Su Ming. If anyone took a closer look, they would be able to see that there were 9 layers to the blood-red screen of light. The further they went, the thicker the red light became. As they surrounded the area, they formed a rune. Beyond the rune was a long black blade floating above the screen of light. Beyond the blade were 3 people sitting cross-legged on the screen of light. These 3 people were naturally the 2 old men and the boy who had been in the temple just now. The 3 of them had their eyes shut, as if they were maintaining the operation of the rune. I told you, once we leave this place, blood will flow in rivers. Su Ming walked forward slowly and pointed at the side with his left index finger. Immediately, a bloody hole appeared at the center of the savage's brows, and he fell backwards dead. I told you, those who offend the land of South Morning will be killed, no matter how far away they are. Su Ming threw the long spear in his right hand forward. That long spear charged forward and landed on a mountain in the distance. With a bang, the mountain immediately crumbled into pieces. At the same time, Su Ming lifted his right hand and seized the air in the direction of the shattered mountain, then swung his arm outwards. Immediately, a whirlwind appeared out of nowhere at the spot where the mountain crumbled. That whirlwind swept up an endless amount of shattered stones, stirring up a whistling sound that spread outwards with a bang. Those shattered stones contained the power of Su Ming's wind berserker art, and with its strength, it stirred up a rain of blood. I told you, the blood of the land of South Morning must be paid with blood. Su Ming walked to the crumbled mountain and to the side of the long spear that was stabbed into the ground. Once he held it, he pulled it out slowly and lifted his left hand to casually seize the air behind him. With it, a savage who had closed in on him was immediately seized by the neck. When he turned around, he did not look at that person's despairing and terrified gaze. Once he crushed that person's neck, he let go and lifted his head to look at the 3 people sitting cross-legged on the blood-red screen of light in the sky. The instant he looked towards these 3 people, they immediately noticed Su Ming's aloof gaze. Their hearts trembled, and at the same time, hundreds of savages remained within the blood-red screen of light that enveloped most of Scour Civ Island. As they continued fighting, the sky turned red, and the ground was also dyed red. The screen of light crumbled. They were afraid, terrified, and all of it was because of Su Ming's murderous aura. That callous, merciless, and crazed slaughter made all of them feel as if they were submerged in hell. They had met someone who was even more ruthless than they were. When they faced this sort of person, everything they had was crushed. Is this what you savages are like? Savages who only know how to bully the weak. At the same time, Su Ming spoke calmly. He thrust the long spear in his hand towards the ground. The instant the long spear touched the ground, it immediately shone with a purple light and melted. The purple armor on Su Ming's body also melted. The armor instantly turned into an endless amount of purple threads. Once the armor was removed, the purple threads crawled madly into the ground, as if they had gained a life of their own under the piercing purple light around Su Ming's body. Almost the instant they crawled into the ground, shrill screams of pain reverberated in the air within the blood-red screen of light. Purple threads suddenly crawled out of the ground under the hundreds of people remaining and charged towards their bodies. In the blink of an eye, the entire screen of light on the island was dyed purple. I'll continue begging for monthly votes. I'll be infinitely closer to the top. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 585. As the screams of pain rose and fell in the purple light, banging sounds rang out one after another. Those were the sounds of all the savages within the blood-red screen of light crumbling. The hundreds of people who survived had a large amount of purple threads seeping into their bodies under Su Ming's strange killing move, and their bodies were torn apart. Rivers of blood flowed on the ground, and an innumerable amount of mangled corpses littered the ground. Once all the savages within the red screen of light died, the purple threads that flew out from their crumbling corpses charged toward Su Ming. In an instant, those purple threads gathered around Su Ming's body once again. As they surrounded him, they turned into the purple armor once again, and in Su Ming's hand, they turned into the gigantic, long spear once again. This scene was seen clearly by the three people outside the blood-red screen of light. Their pupils shrank, and shock and fear appeared on their faces. In truth, they were not the only ones who saw this. The near 1,000 savages on the island who were not enveloped by the blood-red screen of light had also seen it. Everything that happened within this short period of time caused all the people on the island to feel an indescribable fear towards Su Ming. That fear was like a nightmare. Even if they did not die from this disaster, it would still accompany them for the rest of their lives, and it would wake them up time and time again from their meditation in the middle of the night. The old man, Mo Luo, and the middle-aged man by his side, Bao Shan, had similarly witnessed this scene. The two of them had different expressions on their faces, but the hint of shock in their eyes was similar. "What armor is that?" Bao Shan's pupils shrank as he mumbled. "That armor? I think I've seen a record of it somewhere before." The old Mo Luo, with the scar on his face, had an incredibly grave expression on his face. Almost at the instant, all the people who saw this felt their hearts tremble. Su Ming lifted his head to look at the three people above the rune in the sky, and with a swift move, he charged towards the sky. The three people's faces were filled with shock. As they formed seals with their hands, they pressed their palms on the screen of light. Immediately, the screen of light turned murky, and blood fog instantly surrounded it. In an instant, it was filled with a thick fog that the naked eye could not see through. Roars and sounds of battle reverberated once again within the blood-red screen of light, which clearly no longer contained any savages. The mangled corpses on the ground gathered together to form the bodies of dead people. As the blood gathered together, blood people also manifested, and they charged madly towards Su Ming. This was the true activation of the Great Barren Blood Rune. The more people killed, the more powerful it would become. Only when they saw the fog tumbling within the rune and the sounds of battle could be heard did the three of them relax. They looked at each other, then bit the tips of their tongues and coughed out blood, causing it to fall on the long black blade in the center. The blade let out a buzzing sound again. After absorbing all the blood, a plume of black smoke came out from the blade. It looked like a person, but its face could not be seen clearly. It could only be vaguely seen that it was a woman. Once she drew out the long black blade from its scabbard, she charged towards the rune with the blade in hand. Time trickled by, and in the blink of an eye, 20 breaths went by. During these 20 breaths, The three people were incredibly nervous as they stared at the fog within the ruin. They were not the only ones. The savages outside the ruin were also looking over nervously. Even old Mo Luo and the Inn shaman Bao Shan were the same. The fog within the ruin tumbled about even more furiously. The roars and sounds of battle surged into the sky, and there were also piercing sounds that sounded like blades slicing through the air. Delight gradually appeared in the eyes of the three people on the ruin. They could sense that the power of the rune had already been activated to its full potential. Even a berserker in the later stage of the Berserker Soul realm would find it difficult to survive in this rune. My friends, it's time for us to go in. If we kill this person, then we'll have done a great deed. This person must be one of the rare powerful warriors in the land of South Morning. If even a powerful warrior like this died in our Scoursive Island, then who else in the entire land of South Morning can be our opponent? As the three people smiled, they formed seals with their hands and gradually sank into the rune, fusing into the red fog. Yet in less than 10 breaths after the three of them fused into the rune, the red fog rune suddenly started trembling, and the tremors grew stronger with each passing moment, causing the savages in the area to put on ferocious expressions and anticipation in the midst of their nervousness. Suddenly, the rune let out a roar, and right under the expectant gazes of the people around them, fine cracks appeared on the blood-red screen of light. Almost at the instant those cracks appeared, a loud bang shook the sky and earth, and the rune shattered and exploded. As it exploded, three people charged out from within. The savages in the area could not see what had happened clearly and thought that they had won. They even started laughing loudly, but a shrill scream of pain caused great terror to appear on the faces of all the people in the area. They saw that the three people who had charged out were the boy and the other two. As for that scream of pain, it came from the mouth of the old man who had charged out last, because before he could even take a few steps forward, a hand immediately seized his throat. As he screamed in pain, the old man's body exploded with a bang, turning into a large amount of flesh and blood that scattered into the air. At that moment, Su Ming walked out of the crumbling ruin. He flung away the blood on his hand. At the instant he appeared, the rune exploded and the blood fog spread out in all directions. He took a step forward and swung the long spear in his hand. The spear let out a hum and sliced through the air to catch up to the other old man, whose face was pale and filled with terror. It instantly pierced through the old man's chest. As for Su Ming, when he reappeared, he was already right before the boy. The boy's pupil shrank. He would never be able to forget what he had seen in the fog just now. He had seen the woman holding the long blade that progenitor Mo Luo treated as a divine weapon, trembling before Su Ming, and the indistinct woman had knelt down to worship him as she trembled. He could not forget that when he stepped into the fog, just one gaze from that person had formed a mighty pressure that caused all the existences in the fog to instantly crumble. He could sense that there was a completely different will within that gaze. That was anger. He could clearly remember that it did not matter whether it was before this person came or after he stepped into the rune. He had always shown an aloof and murderous expression. However, there was no way he would be mistaken about that gaze just now. It was anger. It was anger that surged into the sky. Under that anger, the entire rune crumbled and the fog tumbled backwards. The three of them immediately retreated in shock, but two of them died in an instant. At that moment, before he could run far away, Su Ming took a step forward with that anger in his eyes. "Progenitor, save me!" The boy screamed shrilly and retreated desperately, but he could not avoid the finger from Su Ming's left hand once he put on the purple armor. The moment the boy screamed, his voice came to an abrupt halt. Su Ming's left index finger had already sunk deep into the center of his brows, causing the boy's entire body to crumble under Su Ming's power. Su Ming's white robes had already been dyed in the shade of blood. As the red fog crashed into the ground, the savages in the area scattered in all directions desperately in fear. Su Ming's slaughter had stirred up a terrifying storm in their hearts. At that moment, The only thought in their minds was no longer to pretend that they were not afraid of death, but to run. Their brutality was only targeted at the weak. Their terror had already drowned their hearts like a tidal wave. Su Ming did not look at the savages who were madly fleeing for their lives. Instead, he looked towards the temple on the mountain on Scour Sieve Island, which was now covered in rivers of blood. At the instant he arrived, he had sensed two incredibly powerful presences within the temple. At that moment, he flung off the blood on his long spear, then calmly stepped in the air and walked towards the temple. As for the people who were fleeing in all directions, with the candle dragon roaring and chasing after them, Su Ming did not need to pay too much attention to them. Su Ming's footsteps were not quick. He slowly approached the temple on the mountain. The ground beneath him was covered in blood, and the pungent stench of it spread out, causing ripples to appear on the surface of the Dead Sea around the island. It was as if the stench of blood had attracted an innumerable amount of ferocious beasts. However, these ferocious beasts only wandered around the island, not daring to get closer. They might not have high intelligence, but they could still sense the murderous aura coming from the person who had caused the rivers of blood to flow on the island. It was a terrifying aura. The sky was dark, and the rain continued falling. Perhaps it was just as Su Ming had said. Once he left, the island would turn into a river of blood, and it would become a warning to eastern wastelands. As Su Ming walked forward, the usually bustling Scour Sieve Island fell into dead silence. Only the figure of a woman remained on the ground once the fog from the ruin dissipated. She was kneeling on the ground, and by her side was the long blade that had been loosened. The woman's face could not be seen clearly, but her body was trembling, causing her to feel as if she was struggling and fighting back. A runic symbol was also slowly appearing on her body, and that runic symbol was gradually shattering. Su Ming's face was dark, and anger appeared in his eyes. The dead boy had not been wrong. Su Ming was indeed angry, and that anger came from that indistinct woman. He was familiar with that woman's body. He knew her. He did not expect that he would see her in this place. As Su Ming walked towards the temple, when he arrived before the temple's door, he stared coldly at the old man with the scar on his face sitting in the temple. He was looking at him with a dark expression, and by his side was a middle-aged man with a complicated look on his face. Su Ming did not speak. He only lifted the long spear several dozens of feet in his right hand slowly and pointed the tip of the spear towards the two people in the temple. The old man's face turned even darker. He clenched his right hand tightly and stood up. The old man was incredibly tall, and once he stood up, a mighty pressure immediately spread out from his body. Killing intent appeared in his eyes. Fellow Shaman Bao Shan, kill this person, and I will return your freedom. I beg for monthly votes and one more chapter. To be continued. If you like this work, then please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 586. As he spoke, the middle-aged man by his side also stood up. He looked at Su Ming, and in silence, he moved, leaving behind an afterimage on the spot. At the same time his real body walked out of the temple, he clenched his right fist, and a powerful presence erupted from his body. In fact, there were even banging sounds reverberating from within his body, and he rammed his fist against the ground. In Shaman Bao Shan, battle anticipation. At the instant he said those words, his fist landed on the ground, but the ground did not tremble. Instead, an aura that shot into the sky erupted from the ground under Bao Shan's feet. That aura was incredibly pure, and it was shockingly a wave of power from the heavens and the earth. At the same time, Bao Shan's hair instantly turned white, and a few wrinkles appeared on his face. It was as if his soul had changed, and it gave Su Ming the impression that he was facing a battle shaman. Human elemental aura, battle anticipation. Banging sounds reverberated violently from his body, and as he lifted his head, veins popped up on his face. He took a step towards Su Ming, and as he closed in, a presence that could topple mountains and overturn seas erupted from his body and pressed down on Su Ming. Almost the instant Bao Shan walked out, a glint appeared in Mo Luo's eyes. He stood there and lifted his right hand. Immediately, black light spread out and covered his entire body. In the blink of an eye, a small half of his body was enveloped in black light, and he glared at Su Ming with a cold gaze. Bao Shan's punch contained the power of an in-battle shaman. That punch instantly caused an endless amount of cracks to appear in the air between him and Su Ming. As if it could not withstand the force, it started collapsing. Su Ming lifted his right hand, and the long spear he held was instantly surrounded by purple light. He swept it towards Bao Shan, and at the same time, he lifted his left hand and seized the air in the direction of the sky. Immediately, the vortex in the sky rumbled and stirred up a huge gust of wind that charged towards Su Ming's left hand. Once he held it, it was as if he had control over an endless amount of whirlwinds. The instant the long spear crashed into Bao Shan and a loud bang reverberated in the air, Su Ming pushed the whirlwind in his left hand towards Bao Shan. Booming sounds reverberated in the air. Golden light circulated within Su Ming's body under his purple armor, and a powerful force burst forth from all his berserker bones at that instant. At the same time, as Su Ming's foot landed, he instantly disappeared from spot. When he reappeared, he was already beside Bao Shan. Lightning swam around the purple armor on his body. It was Su Ming's power of the lightning berserker erupting forth at that moment. Lightning rumbled, and in the blink of an eye, it covered the entire area. When it enveloped Treasure Mountain, Su Ming formed a seal with his left hand, and a profound look appeared in his eyes. Wisps of black threads grew out of his left hand, and like clumps of hair, they surrounded the cracks in his palm. Then, he pushed his palm towards Treasure Mountain, which was surrounded by lightning and rumbling. That black thread was the power of the curse Su Ming had come to understand from the Candle Dragon. At that moment, the black thread was spreading out from the gaps between his fingers. The instant he pressed down on Bao Shan, he turned around swiftly and his pupils shrank. He did not fight back, but lifted his right foot and stomped on the ground. Hair of the earth and sky turned soul catchers into soul. When he took that step, a black pillar of air shot out with a bang from under Bao Shan's feet. Once it enveloped him, his hair immediately turned from white to red. His face became much older, but his eyes instantly became profound. An incredibly pure aura that belonged to a soul catcher erupted from his body. The moment Su Ming pressed his palm down, Bao Shan lifted his right hand and formed a seal. Wisps of black fog also appeared on his palm. That black fog might seem faint, but exuded the same power of the curse as Su Ming's. The instant their palms collided, Mo Luo, who was in the temple, was completely covered by the black light. Killing intent flashed in his eyes. "Trap him, and you will be free." Mo Luo let out a low growl and took a step forward. He was so quick that he closed in on Su Ming in an instant. The instant he closed in, a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He had long since noticed that something was off. This old Mo Luo had remained in the hall and refused to walk out. Even when Su Ming was slaughtering the people on the island, he had not attacked. All of this was definitely related to the hall. That was why Su Ming did not step into the hall, but lifted the long spear outside. Even if he had to fight against Bao Shan, he had still been waiting for the moment the old man walked out of the hall. If the old man still refused to come out, then Su Ming still had a way to make him come out. He was also certain that once he showed weakness, there was a high possibility that the old man would not ignore him. During his fight against Bao Shan just now, Su Ming had finally succeeded in luring the old Mo Luo out of the hall. Almost the moment he walked out, a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. Just as he was about to retreat, a resolute look appeared on Bao Shan's face, and he closed his eyes without any hesitation. When he closed his eyes and reopened them, for words came out of Bao Shan's mouth. "Heaven's hair becomes the whole." The instant he said those words, shadows immediately appeared out of thin air around Su Ming. There were men, women, the elderly, and the young among these shadows. They were not vengeful spirits, and their appearances were practically the same. It did not matter whether they were men or women, old or young. All of them had the same faces. The only difference between them was that they were male and female, and the marks left behind by time. These shadows seemed endless in Su Ming's eyes, as if he was immersed in an illusion. What caused his heart to tremble was that he could clearly feel his own face changing rapidly, as if it was about to fuse with the others. This was the first time Su Ming had encountered this sort of strange divine ability. Almost the instant he was trapped by Bao Shan's art, old Mo Luo walked out of the hall, and black mist spread out from his entire body. It turned into fog in midair and charged towards Su Ming. By the looks of it, it wanted to gather around Su Ming. The black fog closed in on Su Ming and surrounded him. As it shrank swiftly, it looked as if it had turned into a statue. Once the fog completely gathered around Su Ming, it would envelop him and turn him into a statue. That statue was naturally Mo Luo's statue of the god of berserkers. This divine ability was also one of his best killing moves, Berserker Soul Tier. However, since Su Ming dared to come to scour Civ Island and fight against Bao Shan to lure out Mo Luo, he was naturally prepared. Almost the moment he noticed that he was trapped in the strange crowd, Su Ming lifted his left hand and turned his palm towards the sky. Past, future, fuse together and become destiny, Su Ming said calmly. As he mumbled those words, the black fog had already enveloped him, and a gigantic statue manifested around him. Tear! Mo Luo's face turned ferocious, and he immediately let out a low growl. Yet the moment he let out a roar, the statue that enveloped Su Ming exploded. As it exploded, Bao Shan's face turned pale, and he took a few steps back. Blood trickled down the corners of his mouth, and he noticed that his art of having all the hairs in the world being one had been forcefully broken. At the same time, a teenager walked out slowly from the crumbling statue. Half of his hair was white, and the other was purple. As the person appeared, a power of destiny that could overturn the universe, make the world lose its color, and make the heavens close their eyes. Since you're out, then don't go back. There was a hint of childishness in the cold voice. The moment it traveled into Su Ming's ears, he lifted his head and looked towards Mo Luo and Bao Shan. The moment they saw Su Ming's gaze, both of their hearts trembled at the same time. I had originally planned to write 2 chapters today because I had something to do at home, but when I reached the latter part of my novel, I pushed aside everything and chose to explode. I might not explode tomorrow. Please let me rest for a while before I explode, all right? I want monthly votes. I crave monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this novel, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 587. There were still 3 days left before the end of the double monthly votes. The next time would be at the end of the year. Fellow Taoists, please take a look at the personal center to see if there are still monthly votes. If you think it's troublesome, you don't have to look at it. Just click on the monthly vote button. Maybe there really is. Maybe I might really have it. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 588. Before Su Ming turned into destiny, he had a 7th of his berserker bones, the inheritance of the Wind Berserker and Lightning Berserker, and his various enchanted treasures allowed him to surpass a normal powerful berserker in the Berserker Soul Realm, and his battle prowess could catch up to the later stage of the Berserker Soul Realm. Even if he could not win against those in the later stage of the Berserker Soul Realm, all those who were below the latter stage would definitely not be his opponent. Once he turned into destiny, due to his control over the power of the past and the future, he had come to understand the laws of positive and negative. His strange divine ability allowed him to intersect the past and future, allowing his combat prowess to explode endlessly. When it was combined with his arts, his chi would be infinitely close to great completion in the Berserker Soul Realm. However, every single time he turned into destiny, he would only be able to last for 15 breaths. Even if Su Ming had trained in the frozen world for several years and gained an extra 1 or 2 breaths, he would not be able to last for more than 20 breaths. Yet even so, it was still enough for Su Ming to become an incredibly powerful existence in the world. Even if it was only for a dozen-something breaths, it was still enough for him to command the world. The instant he turned into destiny, Su Ming walked out of the statue of the god of berserkers formed by Mo Luo's crumbling berserker soul. As he took a step forward, he looked as if he was still in the distance, but in truth, with just one step, he had already appeared right before Bao Shan. Bao Shan's pupils shrank. Almost at the instant Su Ming walked towards him, he took a swift step back without any hesitation. Yet almost the instant he moved back, he immediately saw Su Ming lifting his left hand and swinging his arm with an aloof swing. The instant he swung his arm, Bao Shan felt as if the world before him froze and everything shattered into pieces. The booming sounds by his ears were mixed with piercing whistles, causing the world before him to reassemble once it shattered into pieces. However, this reassembly made him feel as if time had been reversed. He could only watch as his body moved uncontrollably along with the world's reversal. Even though he wanted to move back, he did not move back. Instead, he moved forward in the same manner as when he took a step back earlier. This strange experience caused shock to appear in Bao Shan's eyes. With his level of cultivation, he could practically tell with just one glance just how unbelievable this was. This is the reversal of time. At the instant Bao Shan was shocked, Su Ming's words as he swung his arm reached his ears. My left hand represents the past. In old Mo Luo's eyes, this scene was different. He saw Bao Shan clearly retreating, but before his foot even landed on the ground, he immediately took a step forward. Judging by his actions, it was as if he had taken the initiative to send Su Ming's right index finger towards him as he walked over. At this moment, he sensed the powerful fluctuations of the world origin energy around him. The signs of time reversing caused fine cracks to appear in the void, and the blood on the ground to flow in reverse. All of this seemed to have happened slowly, but when Mo Luo registered what was going on, he saw the end Shaman Treasure Mountain coming into contact with Su Ming's right index finger, and without a single hint of resistance or struggle, he coughed out blood and fell back with a bang. However, this was not the end. Mo Luo's shock and astonishment were far from over. He once again saw something that made his skin crawl, and even with his power of a berserker at the peak of the later stage of the berserker soul realm, he still felt an endless chill run down his spine, and fear towards Su Ming rose in his heart. He saw Bao Shan coughing up blood and tumbling backwards. Su Ming took an aloof step forward, but the instant his foot landed, he lifted his left hand and swung it once again. Bao Shan, who was tumbling backwards, froze in midair for a moment, and soon after, it was as if everything had turned in reverse. He no longer fell back, but charged towards Su Ming instead. The blood he coughed out also gathered in midair from the blood mist and turned into drops of blood that charged towards Bao Shan's mouth. Then, as Su Ming took a step forward, he pointed forward once again. The first finger landed on Bao Shan's chest, the second on the center of his brows, and the third on his throat. All three fingers landed on him. It might seem as if they were repeating each other, but in truth, all of this happened in an instant. After an instant, Bao Shan let out a muffled groan and coughed out a few mouthfuls of blood. His body fell to the ground in the distance with a bang, and his face turned pale. Shock and terror appeared on his face, and blood trickled down the corners of his mouth. Just as he was about to stand up and retreat, he did not notice the cold sneer on Su Ming's lips and the candle dragon's gaping mouth suddenly appearing right behind him. As Bao Shan struggled to stand up, his heart trembled and his face filled with disbelief and terror. He sensed a strong sense of danger, but he could not dodge it. The world around him turned black. The candle dragon that was the small snake behind him devoured him in one gulp, and its gigantic body appeared in the sky. It lifted its head and let out a loud roar. Great completion in the Berserker Soul Realm. You're a Berserker who has attained great completion in the Berserker Soul Realm. Mo Luo's eyes went wide. At that moment, a huge storm raged in his heart. The feeling that Su Ming had given him previously was incredibly strong, but he had thought that it was because of the purple armor. In truth, that was indeed the case. The Undertaker of Evil's armor did not possess any sort of defensive properties. It only had one function, and that was to attack, and attack again. When a person wore that armor, they would be filled with murderous aura. If their will was not strong enough, they would immediately be turned into a puppet that only knew how to kill and had no intelligence. Yet even so, that armor could allow a person's combat abilities to increase by leaps and bounds, and they could even bring out power that surpassed their level of cultivation. That was why Mo Luo had felt that Su Ming was a very troublesome opponent before this. That was why he did not go out recklessly. Instead, he waited for Su Ming to be continuously weakened. Yet now, he saw that Su Ming was no longer wearing his armor, but that strange divine ability, that terrifying ability to reverse time, and that shocking scene with those 3 fingers made Mo Luo realize to his shock that Su Ming could not be considered terrifying even when he was wearing that armor. Instead, it was this Su Ming who was not wearing his armor, but had half of his hair white and the other purple. This was the moment when he was at his strongest. In Mo Luo's eyes, he would not be able to heavily injure an end shaman with just 3 fingers. The only people who could do this were the rare old monsters who had attained great completion in the Berserker Soul realm. Only these people would have this sort of power that could shake the sky and earth, and only these people would have the strength to kill an end shaman with just 3 fingers. He's from the land of South Morning. Could he be one of the 3 great berserkers of the land of South Morning? Among the 3 great berserkers of the land of South Morning, it's said that Tian Xiezi is an old monster who has lived for many years, and it's the same for Guru Li Long. Only the mysterious 3rd great berserker remains undiscovered even after our investigations. Could it be? Could it be this person? Mo Luo's face turned stark pale. His heart pounded against his chest, and he felt his skin crawl. The moment this thought appeared in his mind, he retreated without any hesitation, intending to return to the temple. He came from Eastern Wastelands, and his status was different from the others. One of his missions was to investigate the matter regarding the 3 great berserkers of the land of South Morning. At that moment, he was 7/10 certain that this Su Ming before him was the mysterious 3rd great berserker of the land of South Morning. With this assumption in mind, there was no way he would dare fight. His only thought at that moment was to immediately return to the temple. Only there would he have the power to protect himself. After all, this temple was a powerful, enchanted vessel given to him after he accepted the mission given by the school. However, since Su Ming had lured him out, he would not given the chance to return to the temple. Almost at the instant Mo Luo retreated and was about to rush into the temple regardless of the cost, Su Ming looked towards him with a cold and dark gaze, and with one move, he disappeared in an instant. At that moment, only 5 breaths had passed since Su Ming turned into destiny. The instant he saw Su Ming disappearing, Mo Luo's pupil shrank. In the midst of his fear, he let out a low growl, knowing that it would be difficult for him to return to the temple calmly. That was why, without any hesitation, he lifted his right hand and struck his chest. With that one strike, he opened his mouth and spat out a ray of yellow light. The moment that light appeared, a vast wave of power immediately spread through the area, stirring up an endless amount of ripples in the air. Almost at the instant Su Ming walked out from beside Mo Luo, he lifted his left hand and pointed towards the yellow light. "Great you, South Morris Alba Temple, ancient illusion," Mo Luo roared. He could clearly remember the strange transformation that had happened to Bao Shan before Su Ming, and he was afraid that the same would happen to him. At that moment, he practically brought out all his power to activate this art. Even if you're a berserker who has attained great completion in the Berserker Soul realm, you'll still be trapped under the power of Great Yu Palace, the source of all power in the Berserker tribe. You won't be able to stop me from returning to the temple. Mo Luo activated this art with all his might. He was incredibly confident in this divine ability that was cast using a treasure. Ever since this treasure was given to him by the sect, it had already fused with him. There were plenty of people who had died under this art, and he was confident that even if he could not kill Su Ming, he could still trap him for a moment. That moment would be enough for him to return to the temple, and with his increased power, he could either fight against Su Ming or activate the rune and escape from this place. In fact, he could even summon Sir Mo Quebec. When he remembered Sir Mo K's presence that made his heart tremble the moment he sensed it and made him unable to summon up any form of resistance against it, a great amount of interest and excitement suddenly rose within him towards killing the three great berserkers of the land of South Morning. In an instant, as the yellow light grew to a piercing degree, the clouds in the sky disappeared, the blood on the ground disappeared, and a gigantic palace appeared in the world. That palace was incredibly extravagant, and light circulated around it. There were a few words carved clearly on the plate, placed right at the top of the palace. Great Yu's Mulberry South. As the palace appeared, an ancient presence and an ancient power that could cause people to rot instantly spread through the area. Su Ming's eyes focused. Besides the palace, he could no longer see the old Mo Luo. Great Yu. Su Ming looked at the palace. He did not cast the power to make time flow away. Instead, he looked at the palace, and a cold sneer appeared on his lips. The presence spreading out from Great Yu's palace was incredibly pure, but there was too little of it. This art might be effective against other people, but to Su Ming, this illusion was simply too fake, because he was one of the few people in the world who had truly seen the Great Yu dynasty. He was a person who had truly seen the royal city and the countless palaces. How could he be shocked by this fake illusion? All of this was just him displaying his slight skill before an expert. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 589. But this Tao gave me an inspiration, so divine abilities can be cast this way. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He looked at the hall in the world and closed his eyes. A moment later, when he opened his eyes, an illusory image appeared in front of his eyes. Inside it was a palace, a vast city. It was the capital of Great Yu. Great Yu's main hall was within those illusions, and there was also Great Yu's South Morris Alba Palace that had been imitated. Almost at the instant the palace and the city appeared before Su Ming's eyes, he took a step forward. The instant his foot landed, the illusory hall before him immediately started crumbling, and eventually, it crumbled with a bang. The gap between the real and the fake is so fragile. When Great Yu's South Morris Alba Palace crumbled, Su Ming sensed something in his heart. As the hall crumbled, it turned into fragments that tore through the area. It was as if a curtain had been lifted before Su Ming's eyes, revealing Scour Sieve Island behind the illusory world, along with Mo Luo, who had just taken half a step into the hall, but whose body suddenly trembled, and he coughed out a mouthful of blood. Mo Luo's heart trembled violently, and his heart filled with shock. He did not expect Great Yu's power to be able to kill him. After all, this art was just an illusion created by a sect, but he was confident that he could trap him for some time. Yet in truth, from the moment he started casting the art to the moment Great Yu's illusion crumbled, only 3 breaths had passed. In the span of 3 breaths, it was as if the world had collapsed. The yellow light in the sky dimmed, and as Mara spat out a mouthful of blood, a tile fell from the sky and fell to the ground in the dimmed light. It was a crimson tile, and there was an ancient air to it. Great Yu's illusion had been cast with this item. Once it fell to the ground, cracks immediately appeared on its surface, and it looked as if it was about to shatter. This is impossible. The clan leader said that no one can leave Great Yu's illusion within the span of a few breaths. Even if this item is used on incredibly powerful people, it can trap them for at least the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn. Mo Luo's mind was once again filled with shock. As he coughed up blood, he wanted to step into the temple without any hesitation. However, before his foot could land on the ground, the world around him distorted. In that distortion, he saw To his shock, a scene that Bao Shan had seen just now appeared before him. He saw time flowing back, saw the world around him turning into fragments and gathering together once again. He saw his own feet moving backwards, and he saw his own body leaving the hall. He also saw Su Ming lifting his right index finger and tapping his chest with it, just like how he did when he heavily injured Bao Shan. Sharp pain shot through his entire body, causing blood to trickle down the corners of Mo Luo's mouth. He did not have any strength to fight back. It was as if his consciousness had been separated from his body as time flowed backwards. Since his body was moving forward, he did not notice any danger, which was why he did not put up any form of resistance. Yet now, as time flowed backwards, his body was still in a state where he did not fight back, causing everything about him to be exposed to destruction. This was the strongest aspect of destiny. Mo Luo was almost scared out of his wits. He had seen Bao Shan's fate clearly, and right now, he was in the same state. He could not fight back, could not dodge, as if he had turned into a puppet that was being controlled. As time flowed back and forth, he was continuously injured until he died. It was especially so when he was struck by Destiny's finger. When blood flowed out of his body was struck by a huge force, but before he could even take a few steps back, the world before him shattered into fragments and gathered together once again. All of this was a cycle of life and death. The repeated cycles made people feel as if their minds were collapsing from the depths of their hearts. I can't let this continue, or else I'll definitely die. This person must be one of the 3 great berserkers of the land of South Morning. He's been famous for many years. He must have even more tricks up his sleeves. When Mo Luo saw his body tumbling backwards and Su Ming moving forward, his second finger was about to land on him. His panic reached its peak. He had slaughtered his entire life, but he had never run into such a strange divine ability. When he connected this person's identity to his identity, he began to descend into madness in the midst of his terror in this life-threatening crisis. Almost the instant Su Ming's second finger touched the center of Mo Luo's brows, his eyes immediately turned red. He might not be able to control his body because it was being controlled by time, and he could not cast any divine abilities or arts, but he could still make his berserker's soul crumble. The instant Su Ming's finger touched the center of his brows, veins popped up all over Mo Luo's body. With a bang, a burning power erupted from within his body. The strength of that power was caused by him burning his own cultivation base and causing his cultivation base to fall from the later stage of the Berserker Soul Realm to the middle stage of the Berserker Soul Realm. The instant the power of burning his cultivation base erupted forth, Mo Luo coughed out blood and fell backwards as Su Ming's finger landed on his body. The world before his eyes froze for an instant as it shattered into pieces and gathered together once again, causing him to let out a roar and rush out of the cycle of reincarnation that terrified him without regard for anything else. The instant he rushed out, he did not even bother to wipe off the blood at the corners of his mouth. He knew that he only had a chance for an instant. His terror towards being immersed in the reverse cycle of reincarnation had already reached its peak. The moment he rushed out, he formed a seal with his hands and pointed forward without a hint of hesitation. The 7 emotions of all lives, joy, anger, worry, thought, grief, fear, and shock. As he roared, Mo Luo pointed towards Su Ming through the air, and 7 wisps of aura immediately spread out from his finger. His expression changed from madness to laughter, then from laughter to anger, then to worry, and then to longing, grief, fear, and shock. These 7 expressions corresponded to the art of the 7 emotions of all lives. At the instant they appeared on his face, the 7 wisps of aura that spread out from his fingertips turned into 7 fog figures in midair that charged towards Su Ming. At that moment, due to the burning of his cultivation base, Mo Luo was resisting the power of being dragged into the cycle of reincarnation, causing Su Ming to be unable to use the art of the past to reverse it. His expression was calm. 12 breaths had already gone by, and the limit of him turning into Su Ming was about to arrive. 7 emotions. Su Ming fell silent. There was an aloof look in his eyes, and he did not dodge. Instead, he took a step towards Mo Luo, who had brought out his entire body. As he walked towards him, the fog figure that was the first to close in on him, but it fused into his body and passed through him. It was as if there was no joy within Su Ming. This scene stunned Mo Luo. Soon after, the fog figure of anger closed in, but when it touched Su Ming's body, it also passed through him and disappeared behind his back. Su Ming's expression remained the same, and not a single hint of change could be detected on him. Mo Luo was completely stunned, especially when he saw the fog figure of worry, grief, fear, and shock passing through him as if they could not see him the instant they touched him. Once they disappeared, the terror in Mo Luo's heart instantly reached its peak. This is impossible. It's impossible for a person to not possess the 7 emotions. Mo Luo roared, and in the midst of his shock and terror, he quickly retreated. However, in his panic, he did not notice that even though all the 7 emotions had disappeared, there was still one wisp of emotion that stayed for an instant when it fused into Su Ming's body. That emotion was longing. During that instant, Dark Mountain, his elder, by laying the 9th summit, his master, and so on appeared in Su Ming's mind. When Mo Luo saw Su Ming closing in on him and lifting his left hand, the feeling of being immersed in the cycle of life and death and the illusion of the world around him crumbling to pieces appeared once again. In his terror, Mo Luo gritted his teeth, and the burning of his cultivation base became even stronger, causing his cultivation base to fall from a middle stage of the Berserker Soul Realm to the initial stage of the Berserker Soul Realm. With this sort of burning of his cultivation base, an explosive force was formed, causing him to take a step forward as he roared. Just as he was about to step into the hall, Su Ming's eyes sparkled and his appearance changed rapidly. Destiny was about to end, but his expression remained calm. He no longer moved forward, but as purple light shone on his body, he put on the Undertaker of Evil's armor as he turned into destiny. In the blink of an eye, Su Ming's entire body was surrounded by purple light. When he lifted his right hand, the long spear manifested, causing Su Ming to bring out the power of the Undertaker of Evil's armor for the first time as he turned into destiny. At that moment, with the power of burning all his cultivation base, Mo Luo broke through Su Ming's control over time. Once he paid an incredibly great price, he finally returned to the temple. The instant he stepped into the temple, he spread his arms wide open and let out a shocking roar. My ancestors' legacy allow the 3rd-generation disciple, Mo Luo, to bring back the glory of all entities clan. As Mo Luo roared, the spirit plates placed before him in the temple suddenly shone with a piercing dark light. Within that dark light were wisps of broken souls whose faces could not be seen clearly. The appearance of these broken souls caused the temple to instantly turn cold, and as if there was a freezing gust of wind howling in the air, the broken souls charged towards Mo Luo as the spirit plates shattered. They crawled madly into every single part of his body, and Mo Luo's chi instantly rose. He reached the middle stage from the initial stage of the Berserker Soul Realm, and as it continued rising, he reached the later stage of the Berserker Soul Realm. But that was not the end. As pain appeared on Mo Luo's face, and he let out shrill screams of pain, his level of cultivation rose once again, but he did not reach great completion. Instead, he reached the peak of the later stage. All of this was related to him burning his cultivation base, or else in this madness, he would have been able to obtain the power of great completion once in a very short period of time. Mo Luo's eyes were bloodshot. At that moment, the pain in his body made him feel as if he was being torn apart, causing him to descend into even greater madness. As his level of cultivation continued rising, he turned around swiftly and roared at Su Ming. Just as he was about to charge towards him, Su Ming, dressed in Destiny's armor of undertakers of evil and holding the long purple spear in his right hand, took a step towards Luo, and at the instant his body recovered from the state of Destiny, he threw the long spear forward. This spear strike was Su Ming's strongest strike when he was in Destiny's form. It could be said to be an unparalleled strike from Su Ming's armor of undertakers of evil. If anyone were to truly compare the power of this spear strike, then they would find that it had already surpassed the power of great completion, and it contained a hint of life cultivation. Tomorrow will be the day it explodes, and there are 2 chapters today. Can I get a monthly ticket? To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 590. I feel that the chapters for the past few days, starting from October, have been written very well. My updates aren't as many as others, but it's not less either. Although there are only 2 chapters today, I'm still asking for monthly votes. Because there are 16 chapters in 5 days, which has exceeded the frequency of my previous outbursts. Because I'm satisfied with the chapters for the past few days, because this October, I'll write Shomo even better. Because of these, I'm asking for monthly votes. Also because I feel very embarrassed. How can this be? If a matter is related to face, it's very difficult to do it. Originally, I didn't want to fight too stubbornly. To be honest, I'm tired, and so are all of you. Moreover, there are a lot of things to do this month. I have to go to Nanjing on the 12th, and at the end of the month, I have to go to another place. It's the same at home. There's no way to guarantee a lot of outbursts. Moreover, I still feel that Shomo isn't at the level of fighting for a long time. Originally, I planned to start from next year and use this year to recover. But since it's like this, I don't feel good in my heart. I can't describe how I feel, so I must fight for it. I don't know what the result will be, but this month I will fight for it. Tomorrow I will break out. To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to vote for it and vote for it. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 591. What was life cultivation? It was the cultivation of one's own life. This life contained life and destiny. It was all for the sake of controlling oneself, to know where the person's flaws were, and from then on, to perfect oneself and gather together to reach an even stronger pinnacle under the universe. Even if Su Ming could bring out a power that was equivalent to those who had attained great completion in the Berserker Soul realm when he was Destiny, he was still only at that level. There was a deep ravine blocking his path to life cultivation, and it should have been difficult for him to cross it. But the Undertaker of Evil's armor's appearance allowed Su Ming to gather up his combat power the instant Destiny disappeared and charged towards that ravine. If this had happened before, then even if Su Ming charged forward in this manner, it would still have been difficult for him to bring out this stunning and peerless spear strike, because he had yet to understand the true meaning of life cultivation. He had yet to make his heart reach a state where he could take that step forward. He was still in a state of confusion. He was still tied down by his own body and his memories. He was still persistently trying to figure out just who he was. However, on his way to scour Civ Island, Su Ming's long laughter and epiphany as he stood between the sky and the sea, along with his words, had caused him to be like a butterfly breaking out of a cocoon and completely transcend. This was a metamorphosis of his soul, and it was also the most crucial and most important step for Su Ming to take towards becoming a truly powerful warrior. Since the world calls me Destiny, then from now onwards, I, Su Ming, will be Destiny. This was the first time Su Ming shouted in his life. This was the first time he laughed and said these words of his life to the heavens and the earth. That sentence formed a resonance with the smile of Great Yu's elder in the frozen world. It also formed a power that could overturn the heavens along with the marks on the elder's face. When you know who you are, you will no longer be you. When you no longer know who you are, you will only be you. Su Ming's metamorphosis and epiphany to his soul might seem normal, but in truth, this was the key that allowed him to bring out a hint of life cultivation's presence. The instant that Spear's strike appeared, it shook the sky and earth. It was as if this sort of presence had been incredibly rare in the land of the berserkers over the years. Its appearance shocked the sky. As Su Ming threw the spear forward, the entire sky trembled with a bang. For the first time in several years, the layers of clouds that had covered the sky exploded with a bang. They tumbled backwards, causing the sky to... It revealed the first real ray of sunlight after the calamity. As the rolling clouds were torn apart, more sunlight shone. As the sky rumbled, the sea around the island roared. As the loud rumbles echoed in the air, it was as if the sky and sea were trembling under the presence of life cultivation. Almost at the instant, the presence that contained a hint of life cultivation shook the sky and earth and bloomed in the sky. A powerful presence erupted from several spots in the land of South Morning. The first location was one of the 3 continents, where the Western Sea Clan was located. That place was desolate, and on the peak of a towering mountain behind the Western Sea Clan sat a rather handsome middle-aged man. This man wore a blue robe with a black dragon embroidered on it. Naturally, he was one of the 3 great berserkers of the land of South Morning, Guru Li Long. His eyes were originally closed, but at that moment they flew open. At the instant he did so, the sky above the continent shone with a bright light. It was as if the sky had closed its eyes as well, and it had opened them along with Mithragon's. Li Long stared into the distance in a daze, and after a long while, he mumbled under his breath, "This is life cultivation's presence." At the same time, on another continent in the land of South Morning was a small tribe. Smoke could be seen rising from the chimneys in the tribe, and the faint sounds of children playing could be heard. The sound of a sun could be heard coming from one of the skin tents in the tribe. An old man had his eyes open, but there was no life in them, as if he was blind, and he was playing a sun. His sun reverberated in the air, and a smile gradually appeared on his lips. If that was the case in the land of South Morning, powerful ripples also appeared in several places in eastern wastelands during that instant. All these changes were due to the hint of life cultivation contained within Su Ming's spear on Scour Sieve Island. In the temple on Scour Sieve Island, Mo Luo, who had fused with the will of his ancestors and whose level of cultivation had increased exponentially to the peak of the later stage of the Berserker Soul Realm, was originally roaring ferociously and charging towards Su Ming, but the instant he saw that spear before his eyes, the long purple spear, the monstrous killing intent, and the presence within that spear caused Mo Luo's heart to tremble violently. Even in the midst of his madness, he still managed to suppress his fear. His fear was clearly shown on his face and in his eyes. It also erupted from the will of his ancestors that had crawled into his body. Those wills might have come from death, but even if they were the wills of death, once they sensed the presence of life cultivation contained within Su Ming's spear, they also descended into madness. Almost in an instant, the wisps of shadows that had crawled into Mo Luo's body crawled out at the same time and gathered together before him to turn into an indistinct figure. That figure lifted its hand and pushed towards the incoming spear. The instant both sides clashed, the figure shuddered viciously and crumbled with a bang. Just the impact from the crumbling alone was enough to make Mo Luo stagger a few steps back and cough up a huge mouthful of blood. Shock appeared on his face. As the wills of his ancestors left, his level of cultivation fell back to the initial stage of the Berserker Soul Realm, and it was showing signs of continuing to fall. Sekmaster, save me. At this moment, Mo Luo's entire body was filled with endless fear. He was afraid, truly afraid. He had never imagined that his opponent's spear would be so terrifying. The ancestral power that had been condensed from the treasure given to him by his sect was actually unable to block his opponent's spear for even an instant. A sense of death looming over him was even stronger than when he was immersed in the cycles of life and death. It crashed into Mo Luo's heart, causing his face to turn stark pale. Not a single hint of blood could be seen on his face, and his entire body started trembling. The long purple spear shot through the body formed by Mo Luo's ancestors' will and rushed straight into the temple. Yet the instant it did so, the temple looked as if it had just woken up and a vast amount of life force spread out from within it. But even so what? Almost the instant the temple looked as if it had just woken up and life force erupted from it in an attempt to stop Su Ming's spear, a loud bang that surged into the sky reverberated in the air, and the entire temple started shattering inch by inch. With that loud bang, it shattered into pieces and completely exploded. Only Mo Luo remained on the spot, coughing up blood once again. His face was withered and filled with shock and fear, and he continued retreating. However, Su Ming's spear still did not stop. It charged straight towards Mo Luo, and it was also at that moment that Mo Luo's cry for help from the sect master rang out in his terrified voice. That cry for help from the sect master appeared in front of Mo Luo the instant Su Ming's spear closed in on him. That vortex appeared incredibly suddenly, and a hand shot out from within to seize Mo Luo. By the looks of it, that hand wanted to save Mo Luo. It was an old arm, and the instant it appeared, the presence of a berserker who had attained great completion in the berserker soul realm could be clearly felt. This was the true power of a berserker who had attained great completion in the berserker soul realm. Yet right when that hand stretched out and seized Mo Luo, a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes as he stood not too far away from the vortex and grabbed Mo Luo. Mo Luo's face was filled with delight and excitement, as if he had just survived a disaster. The long spear closed in on Mo Luo in an instant and pierced into the vortex. The instant it closed in, the person who was grabbing Mo Luo in the vortex stretched out his other hand and pointed at the tip of the spear. Both sides crashed into each other, and with a shocking bang, the finger in the vortex immediately exploded. A muffled groan came from within, and the hint of life cultivation's presence on the long spear erupted forth. Under that presence, the vortex shattered, and as booming sounds rang out from Mo Luo's body, his legs were reduced to dust. It was the same for his arms, and even half of his body was instantly reduced to dust. Only his head and a small part of his body were left, and they were thrown into the distance. It was impossible for him to survive. If it was not because Su Ming did not want to kill him now and had gathered most of the power in the vortex when it appeared, Mo Luo would have definitely died. As the vortex crumbled, Su Ming's spear shot through it and charged inside. When the booming sounds that isolated the dimension traveled out from the collapsing vortex, an old voice filled with anger and shock came from within the vortex. "Who are you?" "Su Ming of the land of South Morning." This was Su Ming's answer. He did not try to hide anything, neither did he hide his name. Just like that, once he destroyed Scour Civ Island, he spoke to the old ghost who had attained great completion in the Eastern Wasteland's Berserker Soul realm in the vortex. At the same time his words traveled out, the vortex completely shattered and disappeared from Scour Civ Island. Soon after, light shone in Su Ming's hand, and the long spear he had thrown away manifested once again. The Undertaker of Evil's spear could be real, but could also be fake. As long as Su Ming held onto that transparent jade slip, then that spear would forever be in his hands. Mo Luo's presence was weak, and a large amount of his life force was flowing out of his body. If he had not been at the peak of the later stage of the Berserker Soul realm, then he would have definitely died due to his injuries that could not be healed. Yet even so, he was already hanging by a thread. As a sect elder of Eastern Wasteland's All Entities clan, Mo Luo had come to the ocean with a mission. Not only had he been given a large amount of treasures, his clan had also given him the strongest defense and combat power in this temple. To All Entities clan, this was already the strongest power they could muster. Not a single accident would happen. Even if they ran into the 3 great berserkers of the land of South Morning, they would still be fine. However, they did not expect that there would be another person besides the 3 great berserkers in the land of South Morning. This person's name was bound to spread through the world after this battle. This person was bound to stir up a mighty storm in eastern wastelands once blood flowed in rivers on Scour Sieve Island. This person was also bound to enter the eyes of all the clans, tribes, and powerful berserkers in eastern wastelands, and at the same time, they would be shocked and shocked. This person's name would also spread through eastern wastelands after this battle. His name, Su Ming. One of them is fellow Taoist Chiu Mo Su Ming's wedding tomorrow. Fellow Taoist, you're an old reader, so before Chiu Mo Su Ming uploaded it, you asked me what the name of the main character of my new book was, and that's why this name appeared beforehand. He and his wife are both hardcore fans. We're touched. I wish both of you happiness. May you live happily ever after, live to a ripe old age, and have children soon. Haha. I won't be able to eat your wedding candies or drink your wedding wine, but remember to show me your wedding photos. The second thing is to talk to Lady Wind Chimes on the phone. There are some misunderstandings between us, but it'll be fine once we talk things through. The third thing is to ask for monthly votes. The distance between us is getting further and further, and the last day and a half will be doubled. I'm asking for 1 vote per person. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 592. To the north of eastern wastelands was a land surrounded by basins. Few people could be seen in the sky. This boundless circular area had been turned into the territory of all entities clan, and outsiders were forbidden from taking even half a step into this place. All Entities Clan was one of the 4 great sects formed by the 12 tribes of Eastern Wastelands working together 10,000 years ago. It possessed an incredibly great amount of power, and there were even berserkers who had attained great completion in the Berserker Soul realm serving as garrison in the sect, causing all Entities Clan's reputation to spread far and wide in Eastern Wastelands. At that moment, there was an innumerable amount of exquisite towers surrounding one of the numerous basins on the ground. There was also black smoke rising into the air, and within the depths of the black smoke, a black hall could be seen on the ground. The hall looked as if it was burning, causing the black smoke to rise into the air. That black smoke was also the only one in this boundless area. It was the symbol of the spirit of all Entities Clan, and it was the most distinct sight that could intimidate those from the other sects. In Eastern Wastelands, only those who had attained great completion in the Berserker Soul realm could gather up this sort of rolling smoke and use this method to intimidate everyone. At that moment, there was an old man in black robes sitting cross-legged in the hall within the depths of the black smoke. That old man's hair was a mess, and there was a berserker mark in the shape of a scorpion on his face. That scorpion shone with a dark light, causing the old man to look even more bizarre and mysterious. A powerful wave of ripples reverberated around his body. The area around him was empty, and there was only a middle-aged man kneeling respectfully 100-something feet away from him. Yet at that moment, the old man's right hand crumbled with a bang. As it turned into a bloody mess, the 5 fingers on his left hand shattered at the same time. This sudden scene caused the middle-aged man to immediately lift his head. His face was filled with shock, along with fear and panic. He did not know what had happened. He had only received Mo Luo's call for help, which was why he had immediately greeted the great sect elder and begged him to take action. However, once the great sect elder cast his art, this sort of thing happened, and there was no way that he would not be shocked. Great sect elder. Before the middle-aged man could finish speaking, the old man with the scorpion berserker mark on his face opened his eyes. A brilliant light shone in his eyes, and at the same time, the middle-aged man sensed, to his shock, a presence that terrified him suddenly appearing in the hall. That aura did not belong to the old man, but an illusory shadow of a spear in the air above the hall. That shadow flashed and charged towards the old man. At the instant it closed in, the old man bit the tip of his tongue and coughed out a mouthful of blood. Shockingly, that blood gathered together to form a human face that charged towards the long spear. Rumbling sounds echoed in the main hall. The resulting shockwave caused the middle-aged man to stagger backward. He even coughed up a mouthful of blood. The fear on his face grew even stronger. He could vaguely guess what had happened, but he didn't dare to believe it. That's impossible. With the great sect elder's level of cultivation, how could he be injured and the enemy's presence still manage to catch up to him? How? How is this possible? The great sect elder went to save Mo Luo, but Mo Luo is in the sea, and he's facing south morning. Could it be that Mo Luo ran into the three great berserkers of south morning? But even if it's the three great berserkers, the great sect elder wouldn't do this. As the middle-aged man's heart trembled in shock, the black smoke rising into the air outside the hall was cut off for an instant. It might have recovered quickly, and there might not be many people who saw it, but this scene was enough to tell just how shocked the great sect elder was when he faced Su Ming's spear. Once the rumbling sound faded away, the illusory shadow of the long spear disappeared. The great sect elder's mangled hands regrew in a bizarre manner, and by the looks of it, he would be able to recover completely before long. The middle-aged man's heart raced against his chest. Just as he was about to speak, his voice was cut off once again. The old man, sitting on the ground, lifted his head swiftly and looked towards the sky. "Who are you?" There was anger in his voice, but there was also a hint of wariness. "Su Ming of South Morning." The instant the great sect elder spoke, the middle-aged man shuddered and lifted his head swiftly. He heard a voice that seemed to have cut off time and space from the empty space around him. That voice was aloof and had a hint of youthfulness to it. But the instant it fell into the middle-aged man's ears, he remembered it deeply. The great sect elder of all entities clan, the old man sitting on the ground, had an incredibly dark expression on his face. He did not look at his recovering arms. Instead, his eyes sparkled. He knew that he had underestimated his enemy. He did not expect that the person who made Mo Luo seek help would possess the presence of life cultivation that made him terrified. Life cultivation. Is there truly someone in this world who has stepped into that state? Su Ming, Su Ming. After a long while, the middle-aged man lifted his head while trembling and looked at the old man. After a moment of hesitation, he spoke respectfully. "Progenitor, don't bother with Mo Luo. Make the arrangements. From now on, all the disciples of all entities clan are not allowed to take even half a step into the land of South Morning." Su Ming had already changed from destiny on Scour Civ Island. He stood there, still wearing the Undertaker of Evil's armor, but the presence around his body was no longer as strong as before. Yet even so, once he executed that strongest spear strike, Su Ming seemed to have gained an epiphany. He had a vague feeling that he had grasped something, but it was indistinct and not clear. It was as if there was an endless amount of fog that covered the path before him. However, he believed that one day, when he reached the Berserker Soul Realm, he would be able to dispel the fog that covered the path before him with a wave of his hand. His gaze fell coldly on Mo Luo, who only had a small portion of his body left on the ground not too far away. At that moment, Mo Luo did not have much life left, but he did not want to die. He was afraid of death, afraid that he would be wiped off the face of the earth. He was even more afraid of Su Ming. His fear towards Su Ming had already reached the peak of his life. He had seen with his own eyes that even the great sect elder could not fight against that spear strike. So what right did he have to fight against it? When he saw Su Ming's gaze falling on him, despair appeared in his eyes. Su Ming walked towards Mo Luo. At that moment, Scour Civ Island was filled with dead silence. Everyone had died, and the island was filled with a thick stench of blood that would make anyone who smelled it feel nauseous. You. Mo Luo trembled as he watched Su Ming walking towards him. With each step he took, it was as if his life force was being extinguished, causing him to descend into madness in the midst of endless fear. "It's useless even if you kill me. I'm a member of All Entities Clan. I came here because of All Entities Clan's arrangements. You, Black Sparrow. Sir Black Sparrow, save me. Sir Black Sparrow." In the midst of his fear and madness, a brilliant light suddenly appeared in Mo Luo's eyes. He remembered that he still had an art to protect his life. That was Black Sparrow, the Lord Black Sparrow who had made him tremble in fear just by sensing his presence. He did not dare attack, and had instead worshipped him respectfully. That presence not only made him terrified, Bao Shan was also shocked when he sensed it. When he thought of Black Sparrow, hope reappeared in Mo Luo's despairing heart. He had no doubt that if Sir Black Sparrow attacked, then this person before him would definitely die. There was no way he could survive. Yet even as he roared, not a single reply came from the island. Su Ming did not stop either. He had already arrived several dozens of feet away from Mo Luo. Sir Black Sparrow. Mo Luo looked as if he had seized the last ray of hope in his life. When he saw that Su Ming was getting closer, he gathered what little power he had in his body, and once he flew up, he rammed his head against the ground. The instant his head crashed into the ground, cracking sounds immediately reverberated in the air. Cracks instantly appeared on the ground, and once they connected together, they turned into a gigantic ravine that tore through the ground of the island. The instant the crack was torn open, an incredibly powerful presence that far surpassed that of life cultivation erupted from within the crack on the ground. The strength of that presence caused the weather to change, and the countless ferocious beasts wandering around the island to let out pained howls as they trembled and fled. An old voice reverberated in the air with a bang in the midst of that presence. Who is it? Who is it that interrupted my training? Who is it that has the guts to disturb my training? That voice was like a thunderclap. As it reverberated in the air, Mo Luo's expression turned incredibly respectful, and there was even a zealous look on his face as he quickly started shouting. Sir Mok, it's me. Sir Mok, please execute this person. Once I'm done, I will definitely give you several times the amount of offerings. Mo Luo was overjoyed. He believed that as long as Mok woke up, he would be safe. It was especially so when he remembered how he got to know Mo Quebec. He became even more excited. He had never sensed such a powerful presence before. Under that presence, he saw Mok's true form and the divine abilities he displayed. He might not have attacked, but that presence was something he would never forget. After spending a lot of effort, he finally managed to invite Mok back to Scour Sieve Island to worship him from then on. He would do his best to fulfill all of Mok's requests, and he even had the intention to get into his good books. At that moment, his heart relaxed, and a smile appeared on his lips. When he looked at Su Ming, killing intent appeared once again in his eyes. It's not that easy to kill me, Mo Luo. So what if your level of cultivation is high? Do you think you can win against Sir Mok? Mo Luo laughed coldly. He could already imagine what would happen next. Sir Mok would definitely appear and end the battle in an instant. Once he killed Su Ming, even though all the people on the island would have died, Mo Luo believed that as long as he calmed himself down and healed his wounds, he would be able to restore Scour Sieve Island to its former glory. At that time, I will kill all the people of South Morning and make them remember my name. I will also let them know that all of this is because of a person called Su Ming. In fact, I will even investigate all the people who know Su Ming. I will make all the men and women who know him die a horrible death. It'd be even better if I can run into his practice partner. I will return all the humiliation I suffered today 100-fold. In the midst of his excitement, Mo Luo's gaze as he looked at Su Ming became even colder. Su Ming's footsteps came to a halt, and he looked at the crack coldly. He could hear the old voice coming from within the crack. That powerful presence could intimidate all people, and even Su Ming had frowned in the beginning. Yet soon, a strange expression appeared on his face under the Undertaker of Evil's armor, but no one could see it. Sir Mok, please attack. Mo Luo spoke excitedly once again. The monthly votes were pulled back by 1,000 votes, and if it's double, it'll be 500 votes. It would have been fine if I didn't want to fight for it, but I want to fight for it. I've already come this far. I want to fight for first place, because this first place is based on one's face. This has nothing to do with the other authors. It's all because a man lives on, and a tree lives on with its face. It's embarrassing. It's frustrating. I want monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 593. Time trickled by, and after the span of a dozen-something breaths, there was only a powerful presence coming from within the crack. There was no reply, and this made M.O. Luo stunned. Sir M.O.K., please attack. M.O. Luo's body trembled as he spoke urgently. Su Ming stood there and looked at M.O. Luo. With his head on, no one could see any other emotions besides killing intent and aloofness. Attack my foot! After some time, in the midst of M.O. Luo's anxiety, a furious roar suddenly came from within the crack. That roar was like thunder rumbling in the air. This is my isolation grounds. How dare you disturb my training? If it wasn't because you've made offerings to me many times, I would have killed you. Since this is your first offense, get lost. There was a hint of anger in the voice from within the crack. When it traveled out, M.O. Luo was completely stunned. Once he registered what was going on, he immediately became anxious. Sir M.O.K., I'm being forced by someone. Please help me. Only by killing this person can I continue making offerings. Before M.O. Luo could finish speaking, the furious roar from within the crack became even stronger. Get lost. If you still don't leave, then I'll make it so that you will never be able to leave. And the person in armor, I have no grudge against you. I won't kill you, but you must also leave immediately. This island is my isolation grounds. Both of you go out and kill. Don't even think about coming back. Sir M.O.K. Fear rose in M.O. Luo's heart. He did not expect that M.O.K., whom he had invited and whom he had made offerings to fawn over many times, would ignore him at this critical moment. His attitude was also completely different from before. He was usually arrogant, but every single time he made offerings to M.O.K., he would praise him. He had even said that no one would be able to touch him while he was here. Yet now, Sir M.O.K., you only need a single thought to kill this person. Please, for the sake of all the offerings I've made, save me. Save me. M.O. Luo was practically begging. M.O.K. was the last ray of hope in his life. He was his only hope in his despair. There was no way he could give up. He really doesn't know what's good for him. This old man has no enmity with him. So how could I kill him at will? This old man is of noble character and unquestionable integrity. I'm extraordinarily valiant and upright, and everyone in the world knows that I will absolutely not kill someone who has no enmity with me. Even if I can destroy everything with a single thought, there are some things that I'm not willing to do. As long as they don't provoke me, I won't kill. The voice that came from the crack was ancient, and at the same time, it emphasized that there was no enmity between them and that the other party would not take the initiative to provoke them. As for you, since you're so persistent, then don't even think about leaving. At the same time, a cold harumph came from the crack. An even greater presence burst forth with a bang, and a gigantic palm shot out from the crack. That palm gave off a shocking presence in midair, and it would cause anyone who saw it to be filled with astonishment. The size of the palm was several hundred feet, as if it could cover the sky. It pressed down on M.O. Luo, who was filled with fear and disbelief. The wind that was stirred up by the palm howled, and just as despair appeared on M.O. Luo's face and he was about to fight with all his might, the palm suddenly stopped several hundreds of feet above him. A sigh came from the crack. Oh well, after all, you've made offerings to me. I don't want to kill you. I'll give the two of you the span of 10 breaths to leave. M.O. Luo laughed brokenly. He did not know why Su Ming did not want to attack. The scenes from the past appeared in his head. Su Ming's strength almost suffocated him. He originally thought that he had regained hope, but now he was still in despair. Su Ming lifted his foot and walked forward. When he arrived beside the crack, he looked down. The crack was very deep, and there was fog surrounding it. He could not see the depths of it. Almost the instant Su Ming lowered his head to look at the crack, a cold harumph came from within, and there was a hint of dissatisfaction in that harumph. Boy, I've given you a chance. Leave now. Do you really want me to attack? Oh well, I've always been kind. You have extraordinary power, and I like you a lot after I saw you. Leave now. Take that boy called Mo Luo and leave this place." A hint of a smile appeared at the corners of Su Ming's lips under the Undertaker of Evil's armor. "I don't want to leave just yet," Su Ming said languidly. "How dare you? I've already given you a chance, but you don't know what's good for you. Do you really want me to kill you?" The old voice in the crack roared furiously and reverberated in the air. Mo Luo was momentarily stunned. Hope appeared once again in the midst of his despair. When he looked toward Su Ming, he suddenly thought that this person was a little stupid, but he also looked forward to it. If that was the case, then if he angered Sir Mok, he would definitely die. "Sir Mok, this person doesn't know what's good for him. Please kill him," Mo Luo quickly said. "Shut your mouth. This old man has always been merciful. How can I have the intention to kill just because of a few words? Junior, this old man will give you one more chance. If you don't take it, then I will really attack." Su Ming did not speak. He continued looking at the crack, and the smile on the Undertaker of Evil's armor grew wider. Time passed by, and soon 10 breaths went by. After a short period of silence, a sigh echoed in the air. "I've always been kind. You're the one who brought this upon yourself." As he spoke, a 7-colored ray of light shot out from the crack. At the same time, a 7-colored sky peacock slowly rose into the sky. When it stood in midair, a piercing light shone from it. The 7-colored peacock looked incredibly powerful. The presence spreading out from its body even surpassed that of a berserker in the berserker soul realm, causing all those who saw it to feel as if their breathing had stopped. An ancient look appeared in its eyes, as if it had gone through an endless amount of life and death situations and had seen through everything to gain enlightenment. "I'll give you one last chance." Mo Luo's face was filled with excitement. The 7-colored peacock before him was the person he had seen in the past. He would never forget the divine ability Su Ming had cast that had shocked him to the core while in his true form. He remembered that divine ability clearly. Its name was Overturn the Sea. It was a divine ability he had never seen before, but it had nearly scared him out of his wits. Even more unforgettable was the sight of the man in the sky who seemed to dislike the sea and wanted to turn it upside down. He could never forget the words he had muttered to himself. "I don't like the color of the seawater. If that's the case, then I'll overturn it." In Mo Luo's memories, once Su Ming said those words, the entire sky turned into 7 colors and turned into 2 gigantic palms that sank deep into the sea, as if they wanted to scoop up the seawater and overturn it. So many lives. Oh well, I can't drag so many lives down just because of my own preferences. Mo Luo saw Su Ming shaking his head and dispersing all his divine abilities before turning his gaze towards him. This scene completely shocked Mo Luo. He had originally been passing by this place by accident, but after that, he had started acting respectfully and trying to get into Su Ming's good books. Right then, when he saw Sir Mok revealing his true form once again, in his excitement, he felt that his hope had appeared once again. Su Ming looked at the 7-colored peacock in the sky and stood there. Purple light shone on his body, and slowly, the armor on his body turned into purple threads that fused into his body, causing Su Ming's appearance to be revealed. "Come here." With an aloof expression on his face, Su Ming cast the 7-colored peacock a glance and spoke coldly. His words did not give off the feeling that he was speaking to a powerful warrior. Instead, he sounded like he was reprimanding someone. "Su Ming, how dare you? Sir Mok, this person is being disrespectful. Please." Mo Luo's eyes lit up. At that moment, he did not have the time to think about why Su Ming would say those words. Instead, he quickly spoke up, wanting to ask the powerful Sir Mok in his heart to attack. Yet before he could finish speaking, his words came to an abrupt halt. He widened his eyes and looked at the scene before him with a dumbfounded expression. When the 7-colored peacock saw Su Ming's face and heard his aloof words, it shuddered, and panic and fear appeared on its face. There was even a hint of struggle on its face, but the moment that struggle appeared, it immediately disappeared. It immediately lowered its head and put on a fawning expression. It flapped its wings, and like a huge bird, it quickly flew to Su Ming's side. It's a small world. I had bad eyesight just now, and I didn't see you clearly. The seven-colored peacock's expression was one of fawning, and once it arrived beside Su Ming, it quickly spoke up. Return to your original appearance. Su Ming was blinded by the light on the seven-colored peacock's body, and he frowned. When the seven-colored peacock saw Su Ming frowning, its heart immediately let out a thump. It had seen just how strong this person was. He was the person that the five-colored peacock had chased after, and he had even made it flee in fear all those years ago. More importantly, it had witnessed everything just now when it was deep underground. If it was not because it did not dare to run and was afraid of being discovered, it would have fled a long time ago. That was why it had been praying continuously underground, hoping that Su Ming would not discover it, but it had been forced out by Mo Luo. It could be said that the hatred towards Mo Luo in the depths of its heart had already reached a monstrous degree. Right then, in the midst of its fawning, it shuddered, and the seven-colored light instantly disappeared. What appeared before Su Ming and Mo Luo was a black crane that had lost most of its feathers. The combination of its appearance and expression gave off a perverted feeling, and compared to its previous might, it had the effect of reversing the universe. In fact, to curry favor with Su Ming, it even turned its head around and glared at Mo Luo. Mo Luo stared at the black crane with a dumbfounded expression. He looked at its fawning expression towards Su Ming, heard its exaggerated words, and watched it turn from a seven-colored peacock into a bald crane. Mo Luo's mind went blank. His world had collapsed because of a crane. How could this be? He was not someone who would be fooled, but the black crane was indeed quite skilled in this aspect. Because of that, Mo Luo was completely fooled before he even saw it. A crane, peacock. Mo Luo coughed out a mouthful of blood. As he looked at the crane, he suddenly wanted to curse. The monthly votes today are the least in the past 6 days. I know that everyone has done their best. My fellow Taoists who are still watching, could you please send me some warmth right now? To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 594. Su Ming left Scour Sieve Island, and behind him was a bald crane with a fawning look on its face. There was also Mo Luo, who was not completely dead, but whose world had collapsed under the crane's claws. His fight against Su Ming had caused his power to crumble, and Su Ming's strength was etched into his bones. Yet even so, even though he was afraid of death, even though he was terrified, he was confident in his future development if he survived. He was confident that with his intelligence and his methods, he would be able to make a comeback sooner or later. But the crane's appearance made him doubt his own intelligence, and his world crumbled because of it. He could not imagine that he would be deceived by such a filthy bald crane, and he had even been continuously worshipping it over the past few years to curry its favor. Now that he thought about it, when he met that shameless bald crane in the past, all of its actions and all of its so-called mercy were fake. It was clearly a show, an act, and he had actually believed it. Su Ming could sense Mo Luo's thoughts, but he did not care about it. He walked in midair, and Scour Sieve Island behind him was in dead silence. The ground was covered in blood, and it had turned into a dead island. Before Su Ming left, he cut down a mountain and turned it into a gigantic stone monument. He placed it at the center of the island, at the most eye-catching spot. Su Ming left a row of words on that stone monument. Each word was written with blood, and they exuded a heinous, murderous aura and killing intent that intimidated the people from eastern wastelands who might come to this island in the future. Those who offend South Morning will be killed, no matter how far away you are. This place is the first warning for those who offend South Morning from eastern wastelands. Su Ming left his name at the end of those words. Su Ming of South Morning. He knew that after this battle, his name would spread through the entire sea. This was the effect he wanted. This sort of intimidation was what he did for the land of South Morning. Once he left that stone monument behind, Su Ming walked towards southern Swamp Island. He did not intend to stay for long in the Dead Sea that existed between South Morning and Eastern Wastelands. He wanted to return to the Ninth Summit first and see how it was doing. He wanted to see whether there was any news of Huzi there. Only after that would he head to Eastern Wastelands. There was a long black blade in his storage bag at that moment. There was a wisp of fog on that blade, and that shadow had the blade as its body. Once Su Ming took it away, it was still trembling in his storage bag. Su Ming was familiar with the woman's shadow. It was also because of this shadow that he did not kill Mo Luo straight away, but brought him to southern Swamp Island. That figure was naturally the bracelet eldest senior brother Su Ming had given him in the past. It was also one of the 300 shaman souls of Nine Li. I still have to ask Zhongzhe if he was taken away by eldest senior brother back then. If that's the case, why would this item appear in Mo Luo's hands? Perhaps this is a clue to find eldest senior brother. Su Ming mumbled and brought with him the bald crane, who did not dare to leave and only followed behind him in fear. They turned into a long arc in the sky and left into the distance. When dusk arrived, Su Ming returned to southern Swamp Island. At that moment, the protective screen of light around the island had become much thicker, and the island's rune was also being repaired at a faster pace. They were trying to make the rune complete once again so that they could sink to the bottom of the sea to avoid disaster. Su Ming's return did not attract too much attention. Instead, once he stepped onto the island, he charged towards Zhongzhe. The instant Zhongzhe saw Su Ming, he felt a thick, bloody stench crashing into his face, and he also saw the sealed and imprisoned Mo Luo. His impression of Mo Luo was incredibly deep. After all, he had lost to this person in the past. When he saw him now, a huge storm raged in Zhongzhe's heart. He did not expect that Su Ming would return so soon. Neither did he expect that Su Ming would truly be able to destroy the entire Scour Civ Island. In the midst of his shock, when he looked towards Su Ming, the complicated feelings in his heart grew even stronger. When Su Ming asked about the 300 shaman souls and the bracelet Autumn Sea tribe had forcefully left behind, Zhongzhe told him the truth, even though his heart was filled with mixed feelings. I will leave tomorrow. Senior Zhongzhe, please take care of Tsanglan and Ziyan. I will thank you for this. Before Su Ming left Zhongzhe's cave abode, his footsteps came to a halt, and he turned around to look at Zhongzhe before he wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed towards him. Zhongzhe nodded and looked at Su Ming's departing figure. With mixed feelings in his heart, he sighed and disappeared from his cave abode, only to return the next morning. He charged all the way to Scour Civ Island and saw the blood on the island, as well as the stone monument erected there. This scene turned into a huge impact on him. In the midst of his shock, he became even more mindful of Su Ming's request to take care of Tsanglan and Ziyan. He did not have much time left in his life, and he was not afraid of death coming early, but because of this, respect towards Su Ming grew within him. This respect was the reason why he treated Su Ming's words seriously. Early in the morning, before Zhongzhe returned, Su Ming had already left southern Swamp Island. With Fong Tsanglan's divine abilities and arts, Su Ming saw Scour Civ's memories, and he also found the reason why the bracelet shaman souls his eldest senior brother had taken away would appear in his hands. Once he learned of everything, Su Ming left with a dark expression on his face. Before he left, Ziyan went to look for him and asked him about Ziche's whereabouts before she left dejectedly. Su Ming left, bringing with him the bald crane that did not dare leave. He turned into a long arc and disappeared into the sky. Behind him was a person standing on southern Swamp Island. She watched him quietly, and when Su Ming left into the distance, when she could no longer see him, she sighed softly in anguish. Su Ming returned to the Ninth Summit and flew back to South Morning. He had guessed that his slaughter in Scour Civ Island would bring about a shock, but he did not expect that this shock would soon turn into a violent gust of wind that would sweep through the entire eastern wasteland sea. On the third day after Su Ming left Scour Civ Island, 6 long arcs flew towards him from the distance. There were men and women among them, and as they chatted with each other, they closed in on the island. That's Scour Sieve Island. The gathering will be held here. I'm familiar with Senior Scour Sieve when the time comes. One of the 6 people spoke with a smile on his face, and with a smug look on his face, he closed in on the crowd, but the instant he got close, his words came to an abrupt halt. A thick stench of blood wafted into their noses, and the entire island fell into dead silence. The 6 people's faces were filled with shock. As they stepped onto the island, the ground was covered in sticky blood that had yet to dry, causing their breathing to quicken and their faces to instantly turn pale. The ground was covered in blood, and the entire place was in ruins. There was also an endless amount of mangled corpses, turning the place into hell in an instant. The aura of death surrounded the area, and as the 6 people's faces turned pale, their bodies trembled. They widened their eyes, and in the midst of their shock, they saw the gigantic stone monument erected on the island. Once they saw the stone monument, the 6 people left Scour Sieve Island without any hesitation. A huge storm raged in their hearts, and in their minds, the only thing that appeared at the same time were the blood-red words on the stone monument and Su Ming's name. Several days later, another group of people came to join the Scour Sieve Festival, but after a moment, all of their expressions changed drastically. There was fear in their pale faces, and they quickly fled. Gradually, more people came to know about Scour Sieve Island, and more people came to know about the South Morning Su Ming. From then on, the island that was filled with blood and death turned into a warning that struck terror in all the cultivators beyond Eastern Wasteland seas. All the words begging for votes were no match for these words. Fellow Taoists, let's continue to erupt tomorrow. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 595. Do we still have monthly tickets? Do we still have monthly tickets? Do we still have monthly tickets? These 6 days are not a festival to me, but a run. I have to keep running. If I'm slow, I'll fall behind. I can only keep running. I can't let others catch up to me. I have to catch up to the goal in front. I'm still running. Even if I'm sweating profusely, even if my eyes are red, even if I'm out of breath, even if I can't run anymore, I have to grit my teeth and run. Because you're not watching, you're running with me. However, there's still many fellow Taoists watching from the sidelines. I hope that you can join us and join our team. Let us chase the wind together. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 596. Besides the scattered islands, there were only 3 pieces of land left in the land of South Morning of the past. These 3 pieces of land might be desolate, but they were the regions of the land of South Morning that were relatively intact after the catastrophe of the Eastern Wastelands. 3 incredibly large protective runes enveloped these 3 pieces of land. From the distance, it would not be too appropriate to call them lands, because they were not connected to each other. Instead, they were spread out, forming a triangular shape. Black seawater roared between them. Perhaps it would be more appropriate to describe them as islands. Su Ming stood on the Dead Sea. The clouds tumbled about in the sky, and there was a slightly complicated look on his face. He looked at the surface of the sea under his feet, and he could vaguely see a shadow under the surface of the sea. That shadow looked like a dragon's head. This place was sky mist barrier in the past, but it was now submerged by seawater. If it was not because the terrain of this place was incredibly high to begin with, and the mountain range where the barrier was located, then even if it was submerged, sky mist dragon head would not be visible. 20-something years ago, as a berserker, Su Ming had fought against the shamans in this place. In this place, he had obtained a refinement of his will. In this place, he had become a divine general of bone sacrifice, and it was also in this place that he had to run into the land of the shamans to avoid danger. Yet now, this place had turned into a vast expanse of land. The place had changed, and the people had changed. It could only make people sigh and search for indistinct traces of the past. Compared to the complicated feelings and sentiments in Su Ming's heart, the bald crane behind him was rolling its eyes. It was wholeheartedly thinking of a way to leave this place. It was incredibly terrified of Su Ming and knew that if it could not find a way to escape, then it would never be able to see the light of day in its life. Darn it all, I'm a wise and mighty man, and I have a noble status. How could this puny berserker brat speak to me so rudely? Heh. When the bald crane saw Su Ming turning his head around, it immediately shuddered in fear and quickly put on a fawning look on its face. It even flapped its wings a few times like a little chick. When it noticed that Su Ming was not looking at it, but was looking into the distance, it started mumbling in its heart once again. I have to escape as soon as possible. How nice would it be to be free? With my divine abilities, I can have as many concubines as I want and as many subordinates as I want. Sigh, it's a pity for that Mo Luo. Back then, I spent a lot of effort to make him believe me. Su Ming did not care about the bald crane's thoughts. He stared at the ocean beneath him, and after a long while, he averted his gaze. His eyes gradually calmed down, and with a step forward, he turned into a long arc and walked forward. The bald crane hesitated for a moment, but Su Ming's cold harumph immediately reached its ears. As it let out a cold harumph, the bald crane shuddered. It might be unwilling to do so, but its face was brimming with happiness. My lord, wait for me. You see, I don't have much fur on me, and I can't fly very fast. How about I wait for you here? Su Ming did not continue paying attention to it. He might have thought that there was something mysterious about the black crane, but his desire to return to the ninth summit was incredibly strong. That was why he did not pay too much attention to it. Besides, there was no enmity between him and the black crane. With Su Ming's personality, he would not make things too difficult for it. If it left just like that, Su Ming would not stop it either. When the bald crane saw that Su Ming was ignoring it and flying further into the distance, it widened its eyes and slowly retreated. It wondered in its heart, could it be that this person has shown kindness and is no longer paying attention to me? That's not right. The bald crane's footsteps came to a halt. Once it flapped its wings a few times, it lifted its claw and scratched the featherless parts of its body. He's testing me. If I really run away, then he'll have a pretext to deal with me. Su Ming, what a cunning fellow. I won't fall for it. Haha, the more you act like this, the more I can't run away. I'm so smart, and you want to scheme against me, you puny berserker brat? The bald crane immediately flapped its wings and quickly chased after Su Ming. As it flew, it felt incredibly smug that it had not fallen into Su Ming's trap. The colors of the protective screens of light covering the 3 islands in the land of South Morning were different. The screen of light in the middle was black and looked dull, as if there was an endless amount of black mist surrounding the land. It exuded a ghastly air, causing all those who had not even gotten close to it to feel a chill spreading out from it. The land on the left of the sea that was several tens of thousands of leagues away from the Black Island was surrounded by golden light. That light spilled out in all directions, and it could be seen from the distance. The last island was located to the right of the Black Island. That place was filled with blue light, and as that light flowed, it looked as if there were ripples spreading out in the world. Su Ming flew past the sky mist barrier of the past and looked at the vast surface of the sea, then at the world in the distance. He held a jade slip in his hand, and the locations of the 3 great islands of the land of South Morning were clearly marked on the map within. However, since the 3 islands had been sealed off for years and rarely anyone came out, it was difficult to determine which of the forces of power in the land of South Morning were in the past. However, Zhongzhe had his own judgment and had made some marks on the map. Based on Zhongzhe's judgment, the island shining with golden light should have been opened up by Western Sea Clan during the disaster. They were using their power to fight against the disaster. Based on the direction in which the land was split, the Golden Island was indeed where Western Sea Clan was located in the past. As for the Black Island, Zhongzhe could not make any conclusions. He could only deduce that the island shrouded in blue light was under the control of Freezing Sky Clan's Heaven Gate, based on some clues. Su Ming fell into a moment of pensive silence as he held the jade slip in his hand. His eyes sparkled, and he charged towards the blue island on the map. For the next few days, Su Ming charged forward on the surface of the sea. The bald crane followed behind him. They turned into two long arcs, and wherever they went, besides the endless sea and the ferocious beasts from the Dead Sea that would occasionally appear, no other living creatures could be seen. It did not matter whether it was night or day. Besides the sounds of the sea roaring, there were not many other sounds, causing the world to be in a state of relative deathly silence. Eventually, Su Ming saw a hint of blue light in the world before him. As Su Ming got closer, that light grew stronger and thicker. Eventually, a large piece of land appeared before him. A blue screen of light that looked like flowing water shone brightly and dimly. That screen of light was rather thick, and it looked to be about 1,000 feet wide. It was 1,000 feet thick, and it isolated everything from the world outside, causing the island to look as if it had been separated from the outside world. The moment Su Ming got closer to the protective screen of light, a mighty pressure slowly spread towards him. Su Ming stood there, and his gaze fell on the screen of light, but he could not see through it. This was a powerful defense that could fight against the catastrophe of the Eastern Wastelands. It might seem to be 1,000 feet thick, but in truth, it was definitely not that. The screen of light's strength and endurance made Su Ming frown slightly when he saw it. He stood outside the screen of light and lifted his right hand slowly, but at that moment, the bald crane behind him blinked and quickly flapped its wings. "Don't, sir. I have a way for us to go in. I guarantee success, and we won't be discovered by the people inside. This sort of small matter is too easy for me," the bald crane said smugly from beside Su Ming. The bald crane said smugly from beside Su Ming. When it saw Su Ming looking towards it, it immediately puffed out its chest and slapped its chest a few times with its claws. "Sir, watch me." As it spoke, it immediately flew towards the screen of light with all its might. As it lifted its claw, it pressed it on the screen, and with it, its body immediately turned transparent. Soon after, it started shining with a blue light, as if it had fused together with the rune. Su Ming focused his gaze on it, and his heart was filled with surprise. He did not expect that the bald crane would have such an ability, but as he continued watching, a strange expression gradually appeared on his face. Because at that moment, as the bald crane's entire body shone with blue light, its appearance was slowly changing to that of a human, and by the looks of it, it was an old man. The old man stood outside the rune, and a thick aura of death spread out from his body. That aura of death surrounded him, causing him to look incredibly bizarre. He had his eyes closed, and when he opened them slowly, an ancient and gloomy look appeared in his eyes. When Su Ming looked at the human figure that the bald crane had transformed into, his heart trembled. The old man's gaze gave Su Ming an indescribable feeling. However, that feeling disappeared in an instant, because the expression of the awe-inspiring old man that the bald crane had transformed into changed rapidly. He put on a fawning expression, and there was even a smug look in his eyes. It completely destroyed the old man's awe-inspiring appearance, causing Su Ming to shake his head with a wry smile. "Good little rune, do you see who I am? I was the one who placed you here in the past, so open up a crack for me." As the bald crane mumbled, it stretched its right hand into the rune. Immediately, a crack appeared on the screen of light that was 1,000 feet thick before Su Ming's eyes without a single sound. That crack shot through the rune and revealed the land it protected. A strange expression appeared on Su Ming's face. He could tell that the bald crane had fused with the rune with its great power of illusion, then used some unknown method to turn the old man into the rune. There was a high possibility that he was the person who had created the rune in the past. With this method, it was as if the bald crane had deceived the rune, causing it to open up a path on its own. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He cast a glance at the old man that the bald crane had transformed into, then walked forward slowly. Almost at the instant he approached the path opened by the screen of light, his body disappeared. He warped a distance of 1,000 feet and appeared within the area protected by the rune. Almost at the instant Su Ming disappeared, a thought appeared in the bald crane's head, and the crack in the rune instantly closed up. It enveloped Su Ming, who had stepped into it, causing the bald crane and Su Ming to be instantly separated by the rune. Haha, how dare you scheme against me? You puny berserker child? How dare you test me? In the end, you fell into my trap. From now on, you'll be trapped in this rune. I'm going to enjoy my freedom. The bald crane laughed smugly. With a single move, it turned back into the seven-colored peacock. Clearly, it liked this look a lot. With a smug look, it flapped its wings, intending to leave. Is that so? An aloof voice suddenly appeared in the bald crane's ears, causing it to be momentarily stunned. A shudder ran through its body, and it immediately turned its head around. It saw Su Ming still standing at the spot where he had disappeared, and he was looking at it coldly. I'm about to return to the 9th summit. When I wrote this, I felt sad. The world has changed. If you like this work, please come and come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 597. At the instant it saw Su Ming, all the feathers on the seven-colored peacock immediately stood up. As it shuddered, its body started twisting. Clearly, due to the shock, its divine ability had become unstable, and it turned back into the bald crane. The few feathers on its body were practically standing up at that moment. It stared at Su Ming in a daze, blinked, and a few drops of tears squeezed out of its eyes. The bald crane was terrified and could not say anything even after a long time had passed. Open the rune and come in with me. Su Ming looked at the bald crane coldly. As he spoke, he lifted his right hand and formed a seal. Then, without any hesitation, he pushed his palm towards the bald crane through the air. Immediately, a ray of black light spread out from Su Ming's fingertips and charged towards the bald crane. Once it fused into its body, it turned into a seal that was connected to Su Ming's mind. He originally did not want to leave a seal on the bald crane's body. If it had not done what it did just then Su Ming would have ended his relationship with the bald crane once he stepped into the screen of light. He would not interfere with where the bald crane wanted to go. In truth, if the bald crane had mentioned that it wanted to leave, Su Ming would not have rejected it. However, the crane's actions just now had displeased him. The bald crane's heart trembled. It lowered its head and quickly went to the rune. Once it opened it again, it looked at Su Ming with a fawning expression. Just as it was about to think about how to flatter him, Su Ming took a step forward and lifted his left hand to seize the bald crane's neck. Then, he lifted it and stepped into the screen of light. Blue light shone brilliantly before his eyes. The world became blurry for an instant. When it became clear, Su Ming had already walked out of the screen of light and stood in midair of what used to be South Morning. He looked at the ground, and it was desolate. There was no grass on the ground, and the sky was murky. He could not see the sun clearly. The mountains were still the same, and the plains were still the same, but there was no longer any signs of life. There was a stench of death in this desolate land. Su Ming released his grip on the bald crane's neck. With a cold harumph, he turned into a long arc and flew forward. The bald crane hung its head dejectedly and quickly followed behind him while mumbling nonstop in its heart. It had been too careless this time. Not only had it not managed to escape, a seal had been placed on its body. Damn it, I actually didn't manage to see through his probing this time. This berserker child is too cunning. Looks like he's skilled in probing. I'll have to remember this. I definitely can't fall for his tricks again. The bald crane sighed and continuously told itself to be careful of this person's probing. Su Ming walked in the sky. He was familiar with the land, and when he flew several hundreds of leagues forward, an ocean on an island appeared in front of him. Su Ming's footsteps came to a halt. The ocean was as vast as the sea, but it was not black. It was blue and covered a large area. There was originally no ocean in this place, but a world of glaciers. Freezing Sky Clan was built on these glaciers. Yet now, as the disaster appeared and the land of South Morning was split apart, The glaciers in the land of freezing sky clan melted and turned into an ocean on the island, drowning out the familiarity in Su Ming's memories. Ninth summit, Su Ming mumbled. He looked at the seawater on the ground, and the image of the ninth summit in the past appeared before his eyes. Gradually, excitement appeared on his face, and he swiftly spread his divine sense outwards to cover the entire area. In his divine sense, he saw this piece of land. He saw that in the center of this vast ocean, there was a small mountain peak. The instant he saw the mountain, Su Ming started trembling. His heart raced against his chest, and an endless amount of light appeared in his eyes. He slowly walked towards the small mountain, or rather, the mountain that was less than 1,000 feet above the surface of the sea. He was like a wanderer who had been away from home for many years and finally returned to his hometown one day. When he saw the unfamiliar sights mixed with the familiar, the complicated feelings and excitement he felt were difficult to describe with words. The sea breeze brought with it an ancient air. It blew past the surface of the sea and stirred up layers of waves, causing the seawater to look as if it was sparkling, giving off a beautiful feeling of longing. The wind blew against Su Ming's body, lifting his hair and causing his robes to flutter. When it fell into his eyes, it turned into longing and memories that tugged at his feet, making him walk towards the ninth summit of the past. Everything disappeared from Su Ming's eyes at that moment. The only thing that remained was a mountain that was less than 1,000 feet tall on the surface of the sea in the distance. Perhaps it would be more accurate to say that this was just the tip of the mountain, because most of the mountain was submerged deep under the sea, including Su Ming's cave abode, the plant's second senior brother had planted, the isolation grounds of eldest senior brother, and the house where Hu Zi slept. All of them were submerged. Only the tip of the mountain that was 1,000 feet tall stood erect on the ground. It was submerged in the sea, existing eternally. It was as if it was also waiting for Su Ming, waiting for him to arrive, or else why would it be that the other mountains could no longer be seen, and only this one was still around? The past of the ninth summit turned into memories in Su Ming's eyes, causing complicated feelings to appear in his heart as he approached it. 20 years had changed a lot due to the disaster. Su Ming looked towards the top of the ninth summit, which was still hundreds of leagues away from him. At that moment, there was a man standing outside the cave abode that originally belonged to Tian Xiezi. That man was built like a tiger and had a head full of messy hair. He was incredibly built, and as he stood there, he looked like an indestructible mountain. At that moment, he had his fists clenched and was glaring at the area before him. Before him were two men dressed in lavish robes. Both of them were middle-aged, and one of them was staring at the man coldly before speaking languidly. There are only 3 days left until the end of the lease. If you want to continue staying here, then you'll have to bring out more tributes than the last time. If you can't, then Heaven Gate will wipe this mountain off the face of the earth. Since we are both from the same sect, I'll give you a piece of advice. If you don't want to give up on this place, then you'd better bring out your tributes obediently, the other person said coldly. You're going too far. The man let out a furious roar. His face was filled with anger and grievance. Over the years, he had given up too much to protect the ninth summit. During the disaster, Freezing Sky Clan's Heaven Gate cast its divine ability and cast a rune to envelop this place, causing it to be completely isolated from the outside world. Due to Heaven Gate's strength, all the forces of power had to submit to it. The Earth Gate of the past was also destroyed and sunk into the depths of the sea due to various reasons. As for the ninth summit, it was mysteriously preserved, but there was a condition. The man had to go to Tian Xiezi's cave abode every month and bring out 10 items as tributes, or else Heaven Gate would destroy the ninth summit. The man knew that there was a strange seal in his master's cave abode that prevented outsiders from entering. If anyone tried to force their way in, then all the items inside would instantly be reduced to dust. Only the disciples of the ninth summit could enter and leave freely. Most of Master's belongings have already been taken away by you, so why won't you let the ninth summit go? I just want to protect my home. Master is gone, eldest senior brother is gone, second senior brother, is also gone. Youngest junior brother is missing. There's only me here, only me. I just want to protect this place. I just want this place to continue existing so that when Master comes back, he can have a home, so that when eldest senior brother and second senior brother come back, they can see their home. When youngest junior brother comes back one day, he can find his way home. That's the only thought I have, but you, why are you doing this? There aren't many of Master's belongings left. What else do you want? As the man roared, tears fell from his eyes. No one else knew about the hardships and grievances he had endured over the years. He was Huzi, the simple and honest Huzi of the past who had some unique hobbies. However, now that 20 years had passed, the Huzi of the past had an ancient look on his face. He was no longer the child who could sleep every day and not think about anything while he was under Tian Xiezi's protection. Instead, he was a Huzi who wanted to protect the Ninth Summit and leave a home for his senior brothers and junior brothers. If Master was here, would you dare to do this? Even if eldest senior brother was here, you wouldn't dare to do this. Even if second senior brother wasn't here, how could you dare to bully the Ninth Summit like this? Huzi's face was filled with anger as he roared at the two people. That's right. If Senior Tianxiezi was here, we would indeed not dare to do this. But Senior Tianxiezi has been missing for far too long. We don't even know whether he's still alive. One of the two people in front of Huzi shook his head and spoke. If your eldest senior brother or second senior brother were here, perhaps this wouldn't have happened, but they've both gone missing. Honestly, you don't have to be so angry. We're just obeying the orders of the school. We're just here to notify you, the other person said coldly. The Ninth Summit belongs to Freezing Sky Clan, and Freezing Sky Clan belongs to Heaven Gate. We want to take back this mountain, so how can we force you? 3 days later, we'll come here to collect our tributes. If you can't bring them out, then we can only report this to the school. Once the two people finished speaking, they cast Huzi a glance with a hint of mockery and disdain in their aloof eyes, then turned into long arcs that charged into the sky. The two of them looked as if they had pierced through space, and with a wave of distortions in the sky, they disappeared without a trace. Only Huzi was left standing on the surface of the sea. Once he sat down in anguish, he clenched his fists tightly, but in the end, when he looked at the ground and at the Ninth Summit, he cried, I just want to protect the Ninth Summit. I don't want it to disappear. I want to find the warmth we had in the past. I want to leave a home for all of you. Master, where are you? Do you know what has happened to the Ninth Summit? You went to Eastern Wastelands for the land of South Morning, but do you know that the Ninth Summit can't take it anymore? I can't take it anymore. Eldest senior brother, where are you? Second senior brother, why did you go out as well? Why didn't you stay here and protect our home with me? And youngest junior brother, are you dead or alive? It's been 20 years. Do you still remember the Ninth Summit? Do you still remember Master, eldest senior brother, second senior brother, and me? Huzi mumbled as tears fell from his eyes. A man crying like this was enough to make all those who saw him feel their hearts tremble. I'm already very close to the top of the monthly votes. My fellow demons, please make it so that everyone has one vote. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 598. He no longer drank. During the past few years, he did not want to drink because he was afraid of getting drunk, because once he got drunk, he would think of his master, his eldest senior brother, his second senior brother, and his youngest junior brother. This sort of longing was a form of torture to him. It would make him cry when he woke up at midnight. It would make him look at the darkness and loneliness around him, and in his confusion, he would be drowned by loneliness. He rarely went to sleep, and he did not want to dream either, because in his dreams, he was afraid that he would be immersed in the happiness of the past and would not want to wake up. If he truly could not wake up, he was afraid that something would happen to the Ninth Summit. He also stopped peeking because he had already grown up, because he no longer had the mental strength to do so, because besides him, there was no one else around him. If there was anything, then there was only the hidden heaven gate in the sky. It was a place he hated, and he would never forget it. During the disaster, Heaven Gate had abandoned the land, forcing countless disciples in the mountains to leave and become homeless. Even now, he did not know if they were still alive or dead. He watched the mountains crumble, watched Heaven Gate descend, watched all the factions of power in the land belong to them, watched the ninth summit being slowly drowned by the melting glaciers, and he would never forget that day when his eldest senior brother's isolation grounds were drowned. Tears fell from his eyes, but he could only retreat. When even his cave abode was gone, and when his youngest junior brother's cave abode was also submerged, he cried. He could not stop all of this. He could only continue retreating and watch as his second senior brother's house was also submerged. He watched as the plants and flowers died one by one, until there were only 1,000 feet left in the entire ninth summit. It was a lonely mountain and a lonely person. He had struggled for several years, and he did not know how much longer he would have to struggle for. Perhaps it would not be long. Tears fell from Huzi's eyes as he sat on the mountain and looked at the world in the distance. He looked at the still raging seawater, and more tears fell from his eyes. His tears were filled with grievances, anger, but most of them were his longing. He knew that if it was not because Baisu had special feelings for the ninth summit and for his missing youngest junior brother, things would have been even more difficult for him. He also understood that Baisu's power was very weak. Even though Baisu's father had great power in the heavenly gates in the past, after what happened a few years ago, Baisu's father had been heavily injured, causing his power to fall greatly. Huzi would never forget that scene. That scene had a great connection to a person called Sima Xin. No one, not even Baisu's father, had expected that Sima Xin would walk out of freezing sky cave when the glacier on the ground turned into an ocean. Sima Xin, who walked out, had an incredibly great level of cultivation. Right then, he had already become one of the powerful berserkers in Heaven Gate, and his existence caused the ninth summit to sink into a difficult situation. With tears streaming down his face, Huzi rubbed his back and murmured something that only he could hear. "Master, I can't hold on much longer. Eldest senior brother and second senior brother have gone to Eastern Wastelands. Youngest junior brother, where are you? Do you know that our home is almost gone? Do you still remember the ninth summit's principles? Those who harm even a single blade of grass in the ninth summit will be killed. Those who harm the servants of the ninth summit will be killed. Those who harm the disciples of the ninth summit will have all their berserkers killed." Huzi mumbled. As he spoke, more tears streamed down his face, and his heart clenched in pain. This is the ninth summit's principle. But if the ninth summit is no longer around, will we still be around? Huzi cried. He was a man, and his cries echoed in the air on the lonely mountain. Men do not cry easily, because the sound of crying is very unpleasant to the ear, because crying represents weakness. However, when one reaches the limit, the sound of crying would reveal the despair of life. Those cries of despair were not unpleasant to the ears, but were filled with grief. Huzi cried silently until a sigh came from behind him, and a gentle voice that he was familiar with traveled into his ears. "Huzi, don't cry." Even as the voice rang out, a hand appeared on Huzi's shoulder. It was a hand that represented warmth, and it caused Huzi to tremble. Trembling, he turned his head to look at the face that he remembered so well. Youngest junior brother, Huzi stared at Su Ming blankly. His mind was blank, and he could not tell whether this was real or just an illusion. His body trembled, and he slowly lifted his hand to press down on Su Ming's arm on his shoulder. He held it tightly, and when he sensed that it was real, Huzi suddenly roared at Su Ming. "You still know how to come back. Did you know that this is the only thing left of the ninth summit? We don't even know if Master is dead or alive." Eldest senior brother went to Eastern Wastelands to search for Master, but there's no news of him either. Second senior brother also left for Eastern Wastelands out of worry, as he waited anxiously for us. I wanted to go with him, but he wouldn't let me. He wanted me to protect the ninth summit and wait for you here so that you would know that the ninth summit is still around. Our home is still around. Huzi roared, and tears fell from his eyes. It's been 20 years. 20 years. You've disappeared for 20 years, and you still know how to come back. Do you still know that the ninth summit is your home? Do you know how Master would often sigh and look in the direction of the land of the shamans with a dejected expression? Do you know why eldest senior brother came out of isolation beforehand and went to the land of the shamans? He didn't go for his tribe. He went for you. Do you know? Do you know all of this? Do you know that after you left, second senior brother tidied up your cave abode so that it's as if you didn't leave? The plants he planted on the platform outside your cave abode are still there. At that time, while he was planting them, he turned his head around and told me with a smile that these plants can better protect you and allow you to train on the platform with more peace of mind. Because he knows that you like to sit there and exercise your breathing. Do you know all of this? Huzi stood up in agitation and continued roaring at Su Ming. It was as if he was a person who had been suppressed for a long, long time, and when he saw his family, his emotions completely erupted. Su Ming fell silent with a sorrowful look on his face. He looked at Huzi, and Huzi's furious roars traveled into his ears. He listened to them quietly, and as Huzi continued speaking, he went up and hugged him. Youngest junior brother, I missed you. Eldest senior brother missed you too. Second senior brother missed you too. Master clearly looked much older before he left. I know that he went to the land of the shamans and went to look for you, but he didn't find you. Youngest junior brother, where did you go? Why did you only come back now? Huzi hugged Su Ming and cried. His voice grew softer, and eventually, he only managed to say one sentence. Why did you only come back now? Third senior brother, I'm back. Su Ming hugged Huzi and whispered softly. Tears also fell from his eyes. Huzi's voice grew weaker, and eventually, he fell onto Su Ming's body. He was too tired, both physically and mentally. During the past few years, he had been protecting the ninth summit alone. He did not sleep, did not drink, and endured his loneliness quietly. At that moment, the moment he saw Su Ming, he relaxed. Just like that, he closed his eyes in Su Ming's embrace, and gradually, a snoring sound that Su Ming was familiar with came from his mouth. Su Ming hugged Huzi until his snores grew louder like thunder, but he did not show a hint of impatience. A smile appeared at the corners of his lips. This was his senior brother. This was his brother who would do anything for him. And he was also a brother who would give up everything for him. He was a little simple-minded, but he was not stupid. He had some unique hobbies, but he was sincere. He had a bad temper, but he could stand before his junior brother, because he still believed that he was his senior brother, and he had to protect his junior brother. Similarly, he would also stand behind his second senior brother, because he believed that his second senior brother would do the same thing, and in truth, that was indeed the case. This was the ninth summit. Senior brother, I'm back. You don't need to protect the ninth summit alone. I'll make all those who harbor ill will towards the ninth summit behave themselves. Killing intent appeared in Su Ming's eyes. That killing intent was much stronger than when he was on Scoursive Island. After all, he had done it for other people on Scoursive Island, but here he was doing it for his master, for his senior brother, and for his family. I will let everyone know the ninth summit's principles, Su Ming declared calmly. He supported Huzi and returned to his master's cave abode. Once he was inside, he placed Huzi down and lifted his right hand to point at the center of his brows, sending out a warm wave of air. That air would nourish Huzi and ease the fatigue he had been feeling for the past few years. He was too tired. It had been a long, long time since he had slept like this. As he slept, saliva fell from the corners of his lips, and there was even a smile on his face. It was as if he had run into something very happy in his dreams. Su Ming looked at Huzi quietly. He looked at the ancient look on his face, and the honest figure in his memories appeared before his eyes. He also remembered the scene of him hiding behind a big rock with him to peek at his second senior brother. If we're talking about smart people in the ninth summit, then let me tell you, youngest junior brother, I'm not bragging, but I'm the smartest. Huzi's words from the past, and his smug expression appeared in Su Ming's head. Let me tell you, eldest senior brother is always in isolation. Second senior brother is the most interesting. He always thinks that someone is stealing his flowers. Don't make a sound. I'll bring you to the seventh summit tonight to see those girls. Let me tell you, youngest junior brother, you have to be smart. When I tell you to run, You have to run? Damn it. How dare you bully my junior brother? I'll bring you into my dreams. Youngest junior brother, look at the sky. Master is wearing a flowery robe today. Su Ming looked at Hu Zi, and memories surfaced in his head. At that moment, Hu Zi turned around, as if he thought that it was more comfortable to sleep on his stomach. But the instant he turned around, Su Ming's eyes immediately focused. He saw dried bloodstains on the back of Hu Zi's robes. Su Ming walked to Hu Zi's side and lifted the robe on his back. He saw that there were bloody marks on his back. Those were whip marks. They were packed densely together, and some of them had already scabbed over, but most of them had turned into brown scars. When Su Ming saw all these scars, the cave abode immediately turned cold, and an indescribable chill and killing intent appeared in his eyes. I beg for monthly votes and get to the top. This month, I'm going to get to the top. All my fellow demons who still have monthly votes, I beg you. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 599. Su Ming fell silent. After a long while, he averted his gaze from Hu Zi's back. At that moment, the chill in his heart had already reached a point where it could burn the skies. He would make someone else pay for the pain Hu Zi had gone through. If he did not do this, he would not be able to quell the pain in his heart. If he did not do this, he would not be able to quell the raging anger burning in his heart. He was angry, and that anger had already reached its peak. It turned into a seemingly calm demeanor. But if the anger beneath that calmness erupted, it would be able to burn the world. Su Ming turned around quietly and looked at the cave abode that belonged to his master. He swept his gaze across the area. The place was empty, but he had been to this place before. His master had left behind a large amount of items for his collection in each of the layers. Yet now, this layer was empty. In silence, Su Ming moved to the next layer. When he walked through all the cave abodes, his expression turned dark, and once it fused with his anger, it turned into a terrifying wave of ripples. His master's cave abode was almost completely empty. There were only a few items left, but the rest were all gone. Su Ming's heart clenched in pain. He walked out of the cave abode quietly and stood outside. He looked at the world in the distance, and Hu Zi's voice echoed in his ears. His master often stood here and looked in the direction of the land of the shamans with a gloomy expression. His master had gone to the land of the shamans to search for him, but he could not find him. Master! Su Ming stood there and closed his eyes. After a long while, when he opened them, he walked down the mountain based on the traces in his memories. When the seawater started tumbling about before him, Su Ming did not stop. He walked into the seawater, and under the seawater, he saw the complete 9th summit. With a sad expression, he walked in the seawater and walked up the steps leading to the 9th summit that had been submerged. The steps should have been covered in plants from the sea, and when he stepped on them, it should have been as if he was stepping on dust. Yet Su Ming could see that the steps were very clean. Clearly, Hu Zi often came here to clean them. The scene in his memories became clear before Su Ming's eyes, and it overlapped with the desolate scene he saw right then. He could vaguely hear the wind's voice when he was on the 9th summit all those years ago. He could also see his second senior brother standing there with the side of his face facing the sun and smiling at him. Grief appeared on Su Ming's face. It was quiet all around him, and in the midst of that silence, he walked quietly alone. He walked past Hu Zi's cave abode and arrived at his second senior brother's place. The place was very tidy, but it was submerged in seawater. The herb garden was a wreck. Second senior brother's smile, his figure, and his status as a ghost appeared in Su Ming's heart, causing him to stand quietly for a long time. Perhaps there were tears in his eyes, but the tears merged with the sea, so you couldn't see them. Second senior brother, when Su Ming turned around, he saw a lot of plants that had died in the seawater. Those were the marks left behind by his second senior brother. When Su Ming arrived at the bottom of the 9th summit, his eldest senior brother's isolation grounds, he followed his memories and arrived at the Karst cave that was now submerged in seawater. As he looked at the familiar place, He felt as if his eldest senior brother's voice reached his ears all those years ago. The concern in that voice was still as strong as ever in Su Ming's heart. Eldest senior brother. Su Ming mumbled in anguish. His eldest senior brother was a man of few words. He did not want to speak too much, but he loved his junior brothers and his master deeply. After a long while, Su Ming left with a dejected look on his face. He walked past all the spots in the ninth summit and all the mountain rocks in his memories. All of them contained a warmth and memories of the past. Eventually, Su Ming arrived at his cave abode in the past. He looked at the protruding platform and the dead plants that his second senior brother had planted on it after he left. Su Ming sat down quietly on the platform. He sat alone on the ninth summit in the depths of the sea and looked into the distance in grief. What he saw was an indistinct patch of seawater, but in his heart, he saw the world and the ice and snow of the past. The ninth summit was an ice mountain, but within that ice mountain was a real mountain. It would not melt, and it would never, ever melt. Su Ming closed his eyes. As he sat there, his heart instantly calmed down. It was just like in the past, but this place lacked his master's frequent roars towards the sky, eldest senior brother's divine sense enveloping the area while he was in isolation, and second senior brother's gentle smile was missing. After so many things were missing, was this still the ninth summit? This is the ninth summit. This is my home in the land of South Morning, Su Ming mumbled. Under the endless seawater, only his figure was visible on the platform, and it stood out like a sore thumb. However, this clear-cut expression revealed loneliness, longing, and reminiscence towards the past. What sort of longing would make a person risk everything to protect the ninth summit? What sort of longing would make a person sit quietly at the bottom of the lonely sea and search for traces of his past? Master, I'm back. I'm back to the ninth summit. I'm home. Su Ming sat on the platform, just like how he did in the past. As time passed by, Su Ming sat there day by day. On the third day, Su Ming opened his eyes. He lifted his head and looked at the surface of the sea above him. A freezing glare and killing intent that surged into the sky appeared in his eyes. He stood up and walked down the path he came from. Gradually, he walked out of the sea and walked up the stairs leading to the mountain. When he arrived at the top, Hu Zi's snores could still be heard. When Su Ming heard them, the first smile he showed since he entered the ninth summit at the bottom of the sea appeared on his face. Senior brother Hu Zi, have a good sleep. Leave everything to me. Su Ming sat down cross-legged outside his master's cave abode at the top of the mountain. His hair was lifted by the sea breeze, and his robes let out fluttering sounds. His expression slowly turned aloof, and he closed his eyes. The bald crane was by his side. It had been here for the past few days, but due to the seal on its body, it did not dare leave. There were plenty of rumors in its heart, but when it saw Su Ming returning from the bottom of the sea and sitting quietly on the platform, it suddenly shuddered. It had sensed the killing intent from Su Ming's body. The strength of that killing intent surpassed that of Scour Civ Island, causing the bald crane's heart to tremble, and it did not dare get closer. In fact, with its divine abilities, it could vaguely see that even the air around Su Ming had frozen up. The small snake crawled out from Su Ming's storage bag and lay down on his shoulder. It had also sensed the killing intent coming from Su Ming, and at that moment, it hissed and glared at the sky coldly. Time trickled by. 2 hours later, an illusory distortion suddenly appeared in the sky above the ninth summit. 2 long arcs flew out from that distortion and charged towards the ninth summit. Before they even got close, a cold voice echoed in the air. The time is up. Bring out your tributes and come with us to meet Sir Sima. Once you suffer the punishment of 9 lashes, you can protect the ninth summit for another month. Su Ming opened his eyes and lifted his head to look at the sky. Double 7 days. There are only a few hours left. My demon friend, do you still have any more monthly votes? Let us use up all of our monthly votes in the next few hours, all right? To be continued. If you like this work, then please come Achidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.